Chapter 1185. Whoosh. Almost instantly, Qinchuan's figure was engulfed by the surging void energy. This sudden change shocked Lu Zi and the rest. They had no idea what had happened and what they should do. This is only Knight Serenity, who had accompanied Qinchuan to fight with Enkuin in the 99th district, saw some clues. However, she was still unsure. It had been less than 3 years, so there was no reason for the Void Lotus to suddenly erupt. Lu Zi looked anxiously at Qinchuan, who was completely engulfed by the void energy, and asked everyone, "What's wrong with him? Do any of you know what's going on?" Facing Lu Zi's question, everyone shook their heads. Although they could see that Qinchuan's current situation was not very good, other than Knight Serenity, no one connected Qinchuan's current situation to the void energy. Knight Serenity looked at Qinchuan hesitantly and said, "I think I know something." When everyone heard Knight Serenity's words, they immediately turned their heads to Knight Serenity. Lu Zi asked impatiently, "What's going on?" Knight Serenity said in an extremely complicated tone, "Qinchuan's current state should be related to the void energy." When everyone heard Knight Serenity mention the void energy, they could not help but be stunned. At this moment, they looked at the strange, dark purple energy that completely engulfed Qinchuan. Wasn't that the void energy? Could it be that the Void Lotus has erupted in advance? In next to no time, LVZ guessed the cause and effect, and her expression instantly became extremely solemn, because she was very clear that if Qinchuan was unable to endure this calamity, then it was extremely likely that he would be corroded by the void energy and transform into a void creature. However, what should they do now to help Qinchuan? Lu Zi had no clue, and the others also had no way to deal with it. Interesting, really interesting. At this moment, One Leg's voice suddenly rang in everyone's ears. Unknowingly, One Leg's figure appeared outside the translucent cube and was looking at Qinchuan with great interest. He seemed to be very surprised by the change in Qinchuan's body. One Leg was indeed very surprised. He did not expect Qinchuan to have the void energy sealed in his body, and it just so happened to erupt at this time. Perhaps after a while, Qinchuan would turn from Zerg's opponent to an ally. This was indeed a very interesting thing for One Leg. At this time, no one was in the mood to care about One Leg. They were all thinking about how to save Qinchuan. When everyone tried to extract the void energy, it was as if the void energy had taken root in Qinchuan's body and was completely unmoved. Just when everyone was worried about Qinchuan's situation, Qinchuan did not panic because he discovered a very strange thing. When the void energy suddenly surged out, Qinchuan was shocked. However, when the void energy came into contact with the law of thunder and the law of space and showed signs of fusing, Qinchuan was stunned. The void energy, the law of thunder, and the law of space actually fused together very harmoniously and naturally. Although the speed of his fusion was not fast, this was something that was really happening. Qinchuan completely did not understand what was going on, let alone whether this was a good thing or a bad thing. If the will of Enkuin that was contained in the void energy could be destroyed, then Qinchuan was almost certain that this was a good thing. When Qinchuan thought about this matter, the runic sword that had just recovered 60% of its peak power moved. When the tip of the runic sword pointed at the void energy and gently stabbed out, the will of Enkuin that had fused with the void energy was destroyed in an instant. The void energy that was supposed to corrode Qinchuan and turn him into a void creature had now become something like an adhesive. It glued the law of lightning and the law of space together. At the same time, it also had a neutralizing effect. It allowed the law of lightning and the law of space to perfectly merge together, even though they were originally unable to merge together. It was all-inclusive. This sudden and strange situation caused Qinchuan to be dumbstruck. He'd never imagined that the day would come when this supposedly lethal energy of the void would actually become the pushing force that helped him take the most difficult step. Boom! When the void energy, the law of thunder, and the law of space fused together and merged with the power in Qinchuan's body, an extremely terrifying pressure suddenly erupted from Qinchuan's body. It was as if a god had descended from the sky, causing people to involuntarily feel reverence from the bottom of their hearts. At this moment, the void energy that completely enveloped Qinchuan's body slowly underwent some special changes. At first, it was a change in color, gradually turning from dark purple to dark blue. Then, it became blurry, as if the space was shattered and would collapse at any time. At the same time, Qinchuan's aura became even more vast and profound. When the dark clouds gathered and turned into a tribulation cloud, everyone realized that Qinchuan was about to undergo a tribulation. The fusion thunder tribulation. Previously, everyone was still worried that Qinchuan would be swallowed by the void energy and turn into a void creature. Now, they were all stunned by this sudden turn of events. They had no idea whether this change in front of them was good or bad for Qinchuan, nor did they know whether Qinchuan would still be Qinchuan after the tribulation. However, they knew very well that they were powerless to change what was happening in front of them. Everything could only be left to fate. Even the one-legged man was shocked by the scene in front of him. He frowned and looked at Qinchuan, then looked up at the tribulation cloud in the sky. Then, he silently put away the translucent cube that trapped everyone. No matter what happened to Qinchuan now, he had no reason to help Qinchuan fight against the heavenly tribulation and get himself into trouble. Even with the one-legged man's strength at the peak of the combination realm, he did not dare to provoke the fusion thunder tribulation easily, let alone the others. In particular, Bela, who had just undergone a thunder tribulation, knew better than anyone how powerful and terrifying the fusion thunder tribulation was. The tribulation cloud, condensed by Qinchuan, was obviously more powerful than hers. Rumble. When the thunderous roars erupted from the tribulation clouds, everyone had already retreated to a distance of 10,000 li. They were observing the situation at Qinchuan's side from afar, praying in their hearts that Qinchuan could survive this tribulation. Under everyone's expectant and uneasy gazes, the thunder tribulation descended. This thunder tribulation was not the ordinary blue thunder tribulation that everyone knew, nor was it the more powerful purple or black thunder tribulation. Instead, it was a golden thunder tribulation. A majestic, oppressive, and spectacular golden thunder tribulation. Chapter 1186. A Golden Lightning Tribulation. Bella looked at the golden lightning tribulation that was as thick as the Milky Way descending from the tribulation clouds and couldn't help but be stunned. She had never seen anyone who could trigger a golden lightning tribulation. Could it be that the strongest lightning tribulation shouldn't be black? Bela didn't understand, but Lu Zi knew something. In this universe, only people like Qinchuan, who could trigger the 9 heavenly tribulations repeatedly, could trigger a golden lightning tribulation. This represented the tempering of the will of heaven and earth towards Qinchuan. At the same time, it was also a kind of recognition. This wasn't the first time Qinchuan's lightning tribulation had a golden lightning tribulation. However, it was the first time that the first lightning tribulation was golden. In the past, no one had seen Qinchuan's tribulation, but this didn't stop them from asking Lu Zi, who knew about it. Faced with everyone's doubts, Lu Zi pursed her lips and said, Qinchuan's tribulation is the 9 heavenly tribulations every time. Starting from the first tribulation to the gold core stage, the nascent soul stage, the spirit severing stage, and the insightful void stage were all 9 heavenly tribulations. Even the minor tribulations he underwent were all 9 heavenly tribulations, not the usual 3 or 6. When everyone heard Lu Zi's words, they were stunned. Starting from the first tribulation, every tribulation was the 9 heavenly tribulations. The 9 heavenly tribulations were the most powerful lightning tribulation. At the same time, it represented the deepest foundation and potential. It was already a blessing for ordinary people to trigger the 9 heavenly tribulations once, and they could brag about it for the rest of their lives. However, Qinchuan could trigger the 9 heavenly tribulations every single time, as if it was a common occurrence. Just thinking about it made everyone feel terrified. How heaven-defying was Qin Chuan's talent to be able to reach such a level? They couldn't figure it out and didn't dare to imagine it. No wonder Qin Chuan is so powerful. He was able to challenge an overlord of the form synthesis stage when he was only at the Dongshu stage. I used to think that he relied on his endless trump cards, but now it seems that what he really relies on is his own strength. Knight Serenity couldn't help but recall the battle between Qin Chuan and Iacos. At that time, Qin Chuan didn't use any of his trump cards, and he was able to resist Iacos' attack with his own strength. At that time, Qin Chuan's battle prowess was comparable to that of a mid-heaven integration stage overlord, but in reality, he was only at the peak of the insightful emptiness realm. Once again, Knight Serenity recalled the battle between Qin Chuan and Ink Ghost. Qin Chuan didn't give Ink Ghost any chance to resist and killed Ink Ghost. Ink Ghost was a late heaven integration stage overlord. In other words, when Qin Chuan went all out, his battle prowess was comparable to that of a peak form synthesis stage overlord. These were the benefits that Qin Chuan received from overcoming the 9 heavenly tribulations. Knight Serenity couldn't help but imagine how terrifying Qin Chuan's battle prowess would be after he overcame the 9 heavenly tribulations and advanced to the form synthesis stage. Perhaps he would be comparable to that of a peak form synthesis stage expert, or even he didn't dare to think about it. It was too inconceivable. Rumble. The golden 9 heavenly tribulations struck down on Qin Chuan's body again. With the power of the 9 heavenly tribulations, Qin Chuan's attainments in the law of lightning were raised by a level. Even in the face of this golden 9 heavenly tribulations, Qin Chuan felt like he could control them easily. Thus, Qin Chuan turned his gaze to the one-legged man, who was thousands of miles away. Qin Chuan felt that Du Lu looked familiar, as if he had seen him somewhere before. However, he couldn't remember where. However, this didn't stop Qin Chuan from confirming one thing. Du Lu was an enemy. Therefore, when the third 9 heavenly tribulations struck, Qin Chuan separated the destructive power and nurturing power contained in the 9 heavenly tribulations and directed the destructive power to Du Lu. This wasn't the first time Qin Chuan had done something like this. Therefore, it was easy for him to do it now. Under everyone's astonished gazes, after the golden 9 heavenly tribulations struck Qin Chuan, it turned around and headed straight for Du Lu. As if it was drifting, it left a dazzling golden trail in the air. Apart from Lu Zi, no one present had seen something like this before. As the person involved, Du Lu was even more stunned. When the dazzling golden 9 heavenly tribulations arrived in front of him, he suddenly came to his senses and realized that something was wrong. However, at this time, it was already too late for him to dodge. Rumble. The golden 9 heavenly tribulations struck Du Lu with an indomitable momentum. The pure destructive power wreaked havoc, making Du Lu feel as if he was undergoing a heavenly tribulation. Du Lu was a tough man. He gritted his teeth and withstood the attack of the golden 9 heavenly tribulations. However, 3 seconds later, he couldn't help but scream in pain. The destructive power of a 9 heavenly tribulations of this level was too terrifying. Even though Du Lu was an overlord at the pinnacle of the body integration stage, he still couldn't bear it. Argentin looked at Qin Chuan in astonishment, then looked at Du Lu. She felt a little dizzy. Why did the 9 heavenly tribulations suddenly change targets? Lu Zi, who understood the situation, smiled and said, "Lightning laws. This is an ability that Qin Chuan has mastered. He can control the 9 heavenly tribulations." I've seen Qin Chuan use this ability with my own eyes. There's no mistake. Everyone's eyes widened when they heard Lu Zi's words. There was actually such a thing? Just as everyone was still in shock, the 4th golden lightning tribulation arrived. Qin Chuan, as usual, left behind some of his nurturing force, sending the destructive force to Solitary Leg. At this time, Solitary Leg was still suffering from the torment of the 3rd golden lightning tribulation. He was completely powerless to resist the 4th golden lightning tribulation. Boom! Qin Chuan also gave the destructive power of the 5th 9 heavenly tribulations to do Lu. However, when the sixth 9 heavenly tribulations fell, Qin Xuan chose to bear it alone. This was because there was too much nurturing power in his body and he was about to explode. Therefore, he had to be tortured for a while to digest the nurturing power. Qin Xuan also thought about whether he should share the nurturing power with Lu Zi and the others in the distance. However, after thinking about it for a while, he gave up on this idea. It wasn't because he was stingy, but because he didn't know if this would cause the problem of his strength being insufficient after he advanced to the form synthesis stage. He also didn't know if Lu Zi and the others could withstand the nurturing power. It wouldn't be good if he overreached himself. For Qin Xuan, what he really needed to pay attention to was the 8th and 9th 9 heavenly tribulations. Only these 2 9 heavenly tribulations could truly threaten him. Therefore, when the 7th 9 heavenly tribulations fell, Qin Xuan's expression became serious as he prepared to face the 8th 9 heavenly tribulations. However, what surprised Qin Xuan was that there seemed to be a new change in the 9 heavenly tribulations clouds. A huge blurry human face appeared in the 9 heavenly tribulations clouds. Chapter 1187. When he saw the face, Qin Xuan was stunned. He thought he was hallucinating and his eyes were playing tricks on him. But no matter how hard he tried to focus, the face was real and not illusory. What is this? Qin Xuan was alarmed. He had never encountered such a thing. It was just too strange. Above the tribulation cloud, the face was blurry, but the pair of eyes were incomparably clear and bright. They were imposing without being angry, containing indifference, coldness, and even a little disdain and mockery. Qin Xuan never imagined that he could read so many emotions from such a pair of eyes. It was a kind of high and mighty existence that looked down on the insignificant. And that insignificant person was Qin Xuan himself. The 8th lightning tribulation fell. It was still a golden lightning tribulation, but the pressure was dozens of times more terrifying than the 7th lightning tribulation. The vast lightning nearly dyed the entire universe golden. Ayo! Qin Xuan roared into the sky and involuntarily transformed into an azure thunder dragon. He used the body of a true dragon to resist the 8th lightning tribulation. The terrifying destructive power almost instantly destroyed the dragon scales on Qin Xuan's dragon body, leaving him dripping with blood. The nurturing power followed closely behind the destructive power, repairing Qin Xuan's dragon body, causing the dragon scales to grow back. However, in just an instant, the newly grown dragon scales fell off again, and blood flowed out again. The extreme pain caused Qin Xuan's roars to become hysterical. The destructive power caused the dragon scales to fall off again and again, causing blood to flow. The nurturing power repaired the wounds again and again, growing the dragon scales. Although his body was fine, the extreme pain dealt a great blow to Qin Xuan's spiritual world. At one point, Qin Xuan was in so much pain that he wished he was dead. He gritted his dragon teeth and endured it. Finally, the destructive power of the lightning tribulation dissipated, and the nurturing power allowed Qin Xuan to recover once again. But even so, Qin Xuan's vitality was greatly damaged. He even felt a little lucky. If he had not transferred a portion of the destructive power to one-legged, leaving behind a large amount of excess nurturing power, he would never have been able to recover. However, after feeling lucky, Qin Xuan's heart was filled with anger. He looked up at the sky, and his golden dragon eyes met the pair of inhuman eyes. Unwillingness and stubbornness erupted. Qin Xuan knew that the 8th lightning tribulation should not have been so terrifying. It was all because of that face and that pair of eyes that caused him such pain. He was angry. The 8th lightning tribulation did not kill Qin Xuan, but there was still the 9th lightning tribulation. The tribulation clouds in the sky gathered towards the center, turning into 1,000 feet large ball. The power of the lightning tribulation was also gathered and became even more powerful and powerful. The owner of that pair of eyes did not hide his killing intent towards Qin Xuan. He wanted to destroy Qin Chuan, an ant. At this moment, apart from Qin Chuan, no one else noticed the existence of that blurry face and those eyes. Everyone was looking at Qin Chuan with incomparable worry. The power of the eighth lightning tribulation had completely exceeded the limits of everyone's imagination. If they had been the ones facing that lightning tribulation, they might have been turned into ashes by now. But Qin Chuan had withstood it. However, there was still the ninth lightning tribulation. The ninth lightning tribulation would definitely be more terrifying than the eighth lightning tribulation. Qin Chuan will be fine, right? Bela was worried about Qin Chuan. Can the lightning tribulation be transferred to one-legged again? I don't know. At this time, Lu Zi was also in a mess. She did not know whether Qin Chuan could still transfer the lightning tribulation, but she could see that Qin Chuan's current state was very dangerous. This reminded her of the situation when she accompanied Qin Chuan to go through the Golden Core lightning tribulation. At that moment, she really thought that Qin Chuan was dead. Now, that feeling came again. At this time, One-Legged, who had been tortured by the lightning tribulation, had greatly damaged his vitality. His aura was weak and feeble. He looked at Qin Chuan with eyes full of shock and anger. He was doing his best to expel the destructive power in his body. As soon as his body regained its freedom, he would immediately run away from Qin Chuan without looking back. Cultivators were existences that defied the heavens. The rules of the universe could not completely restrict cultivators. It was like how sound could not be transmitted in the vacuum state of the universe, but cultivators could talk and converse in the universe. It was like the sound of thunder when the lightning tribulation fell. It should not have been heard by too many people, but more than half of the holy cluster was shocked. At that moment, countless people heard the sound of thunder coming from afar. Heaven, earth, and the universe trembled. All this time, Qin Chuan had thought that he was an extremely heaven-defying person. This was because no one could have had fortuitous encounters like him. No one could have the bloodline of a true dragon and the heart of the phoenix at the same time, and no one could ignore the strict boundaries of the realm like him and fight people above their level as if it were a common occurrence. Similarly, Qin Chuan did not think that anyone would encounter such a blurry face and a pair of eyes during the tribulation. If one defied the heavens, there would be a day when one would fall into the hands of the heavens. Qin Chuan did not know what that face looked like, but he deeply engraved that pair of eyes in his mind. If he could meet that person one day, he would make that person pay the price for what happened today. But first, he had to survive the bombardment of the ninth lightning tribulation. Qin Chuan was very lucky because he was not fighting against the owner of that pair of eyes alone. He also rejoiced that he had obtained a huge runic stone before this, which had helped the runic sword recover most of its power. Otherwise, he really would have died today. When the runic sword rushed out of Qin Chuan's mind and stabbed into the tribulation cloud, piercing through the left eye of that blurry face, Qin Chuan clearly saw that blurry face suddenly become painful and fierce. It could no longer maintain that lofty and aloof appearance and became much more vivid. He was laughing. He was laughing loudly. Although he could not kill you, he had to let you feel his pain. It was very refreshing. The blurry face was furious, but at the same time shocked. The appearance of the runic sword was unexpected to him. Just as he was about to do something, the runic sword cleaved apart the tribulation cloud. When the golden lightning gradually dissipated, Qin Chuan's dragon body had turned from blue to pure gold. In this desperate situation, his bloodline had transformed and evolved. At this moment, Qin Chuan was a real true dragon. Five-clawed, golden dragon. At this moment, Qin Chuan had passed the combination Thunder Tribulation and officially reached the form synthesis stage. With this step, he directly crossed the early stage of the form synthesis stage and broke through to the middle stage of the form synthesis stage. Chapter 1188. After overcoming the difficult combination Thunder Tribulation, Qin Chuan couldn't help but have a question in his mind. Who on earth was that face and those eyes? Why did that person suddenly appear in his Thunder Tribulation and try to kill him? Qin Chuan was sure that he had never seen that person before. If he had seen that pair of eyes, he would have remembered them clearly. When Qin Chuan asked the rune sword couldn't answer Qin Chuan's question because it had never seen that person before. Just like Qin Chuan, it was the first time for him to encounter such a situation. That person shouldn't be in ultimate existence. If he was, the rune sword's attack might not have worked, and I wouldn't have been able to survive. Therefore, that person should be a supreme existence at the crossing calamity stage. But supreme existences at the crossing calamity stage are rare in the universe. I have no enmity with him. Why would he target me? Could he be the Holy Emperor of Zerg? Just thinking about it, Qin Chuan shook his head and denied this idea. If it was really the Holy Emperor, he felt that things wouldn't be so simple. At the same time, Qin Chuan thought of another possibility. Maybe the owner of that pair of eyes, like him, integrated the law of thunder or the law of space when he advanced to the form synthesis stage. That person was likely to become a supreme existence. His appearance made that person feel threatened, so he wanted to take this opportunity to kill him. This was the most likely possibility that Qin Chuan could think of. Otherwise, he wouldn't have provoked a supreme existence at the crossing calamity stage. No matter who he is, since I've met him, he's my enemy. Qin Chuan had never thought about whether he could turn his enemy into a friend. Since that person wanted to kill him with the help of the Thunder Tribulation, he would fight back fiercely. The attack of the rune sword was just the beginning. Qin Chuan, not far away, Lu Zi called out. Qin Chuan, who was thinking about something, saw Lu Zi flying over. He turned into his human form and appeared beside Lu Zi. Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan's familiar face and asked uneasily, "Are you okay?" Although Qin Chuan had passed the Thunder Tribulation, Lu Zi wasn't sure if the person standing in front of her was still the Qin Chuan she was familiar with or not. Qin Chuan smiled. "Are you worried about the sudden eruption of the Void Lotus? Are you worried that I will be corroded?" Hearing Qin Chuan's words, LVZ knew that her worries were unnecessary. If Qin Chuan was really corrupted, it was absolutely impossible for him to say such words. At the same time, the others who came with Lu Zi also let out a long sigh of relief. Qin Chuan didn't hide his previous encounter. He told everyone about the sudden explosion of the Lotus of the Void and how he had used the power of the Void to fuse the law of thunder and the law of space. Everyone was stunned when they heard Qin Chuan's words. They never thought that the power of the Void could have such a miraculous effect. As the person involved, Qin Chuan also didn't expect this situation in advance. His luck had always been very good. The situation with Thunder Tribulation just now was really frightening. Bela looked at Qin Chuan with an extremely complicated gaze and said, "You don't know, but at that moment, I felt like the entire universe was trembling." Bela wasn't the only one who felt that way. Everyone present felt the same way. They didn't know that on a planet countless light years away, more than half of the people in the Holy Cluster felt the same way. If they were to find out about this, their current feelings would not be as simple as being shocked. This is the first time I've seen someone directly break through to the middle stage of the combination realm after transcending the Thunder Tribulation. Argenton looked at Qin Chuan and sighed with emotion. "You really are a person who is good at creating miracles. All right, let's not talk about this for now. That guy is going to escape." Knight Serenity pointed at One-Legged in the distance. One-Legged had just expelled the destructive power from his body and was about to escape. Qin Chuan turned his head and looked at One-Legged, who was flying away. He waved his hand gently, and a space door appeared in front of One-Legged. The next moment, One-Legged's figure passed through the space door and appeared in front of everyone. Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned, including the One-Legged man. Qin Chuan smiled and said to everyone, "This is a new ability that I've just mastered after advancing to the combination realm. It's called the space travel technique." When everyone heard Qin Chuan's words, they looked at Qin Chuan strangely. They were all experienced and knowledgeable, but this was the first time they had seen someone who could use the power of the law of space to such an extent. As he spoke, Qin Chuan looked at Knight Serenity and said with a smile, "You were the one who suggested that I integrate the law of space. It was also because of this that I could directly step into the middle stage of the combination realm and master the space travel technique. Qin Chuan had the bloodline of the true dragon, so he had a unique advantage in comprehending the law of space. In addition, Qin Chuan's bloodline had just undergone a metamorphosis, so his attainments in the law of space had reached a certain limit. If he took another step forward, he might be able to step onto the path of perfection. Because of this, Qin Chuan suspected that the human face that appeared during his heavenly tribulation should have integrated the law of thunder. Otherwise, the human face shouldn't have been able to control the heavenly tribulation. You've really become stronger and stronger. Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan and said, "The gap between us has suddenly become incomparably huge again." Qin Chuan chuckled and reached out to gently rub Lu Zi's head. He said, "After you transcend the heavenly tribulation and advance to the combination realm, the gap between us will shrink again." After Qin Chuan comforted Lu Zi, he looked at One-Legged. At this time, One-Legged was in a state of space imprisonment and was completely unable to escape from Qin Chuan's control. This was the first time One-Legged had felt so powerless since he advanced to the combination realm. "I seem to remember where I've seen you before." Qin Chuan looked at One-Legged and suddenly recalled what happened in the carefree secret realm in the land of exile. At that time, a Zerg senator had tried to come through the transmission channel, but Qin Chuan had cut off one of his legs with the power of the rune sword. That Zerg senator should be the One-Legged in front of him. Qin Chuan told everyone his deduction. Lu Zi also recalled what happened at that time. She looked at One-Legged in astonishment and said, "Are you sure this guy is that guy?" Qin Chuan smiled when he heard this. He looked at One-Legged and saw the anger and resentment on One-Legged's face. He said, "From his expression, it should be him. However, shouldn't Zerg senators be at the nascent soul stage? Why is this guy only at the body integration stage?" Chapter 1189. Qin Chuan remembered what happened in the carefree secret realm very clearly, because that was the first time he came into contact with Zerg and knew about Zerg's existence. Back then, the Zerg warrior had shouted "Lord Consul" to the descending One-Legged. He hadn't forgotten about that scene. Later on, when he faced the Crimson Army, he had faced 800 senators alone and killed them all. At that time, Qin Chuan thought that the so-called senators were nascent soul stage cultivators of the Zerg race. Now, it seemed that wasn't the case. If Zerg's consul was really a nascent soul stage cultivator, then it didn't make sense for One-Legged to reach the body fusion stage in just over 10 years, unless One-Legged was a peerless genius like Qin Chuan. However, from a practical point of view, that was obviously not the case. Therefore, there was only one possibility left, and that was that One-Legged had a fortuitous encounter. Bela, who knew a little about Zerg, glanced at One-Legged, then said to Qin Chuan, "Consul is a kind of official title for Zerg. It's an official position, mainly for nascent soul stage cultivators. The role of a consul is to manage Zerg's people, including newborns, who aren't very powerful existences. Since this guy is called a consul, it means that he's a nascent soul stage cultivator, but in fact he's a body fusion stage cultivator, which is very strange." Hearing Bela's explanation, Qin Chuan raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at One-Legged with a subtle gaze. He said to everyone, "After hearing what you said, I suddenly found a problem. This guy doesn't seem to have fused with the power of law. It's really strange that a guy who hasn't fused with the power of law can cultivate to the peak of the body fusion stage. Not only that, he doesn't seem to have a special understanding of the space laws. Otherwise, he wouldn't have crashed into the space door you opened for him just now." Knight Serenity also voiced his opinion. This One-Legged man didn't look like a body integration stage overlord at all, although he did look very domineering and powerful when he first appeared. He was like a paper tiger. He looked very fierce, but in reality, he would break with a poke. Insu came to a sudden realization and said, "No wonder. He only used those translucent cubes to trap us and didn't try to kill me. So it turns out that he was actually just an embroidered pillow, nice to look at but useless." The more they thought about it, the more they felt that One-Leg's behavior was strange. He didn't seem like a peak body integration stage overlord at all. As for Qin Xuan, who had interacted with the mysterious snake before, One-Legged looked like an idiot now. Lucy looked at One-Legged and then looked at Qin Xuan. She asked curiously, "So, what's going on with him?" One-Legged did have a fortuitous encounter, and this fortuitous encounter was related to Qin Xuan. In the past, One-Legged was just an ordinary archon, responsible for teaching the newborns of the insectoids how to cultivate. His days were ordinary until one day, more than 10 years ago, he suddenly received an order to pass through the wormhole, which was the teleportation channel, and descend to the carefree secret realm. At that time, the order was issued very suddenly. One-Leg began his first descent through the wormhole without any preparation. It was this descent that caused him to lose a leg. His leg was cut off by Qin Xuan, and Qin Xuan gave away the leg meat to someone else. The carapace was made into Qin Xuan's first battlesuit. One-Legged should not be blamed for the failure of his descent, but he was still angered. He was stripped of his position as Archon and exiled to a demon star as food for the demon bug. When the demon bug's huge body came out of the dark cave, One-Legged thought he was dead for sure. However, to his surprise, the demon bug did not eat him. Instead, it accepted him as an apostle, allowing him to rise to the sky in a single bound. From that moment on, One-Leg's fate was changed. He was no longer an Archon, but he took back the title of Archon with his identity as an apostle of the demon bug. He also made the Zerg Apotheosis stage cultivator who vented his anger on him pay a painful price. He gave up his former name and changed it to One-Legged in order to remember the shame of the past. In the following 10 years, One-Legged never left the demon star again. He worshipped the demon bug and worked hard. Relying on the demon bug's rewards, he walked step by step from the Yuanying stage to the unification stage, and then to the peak of the unification stage. One-Legged used 10 years to walk the path that others could not finish in thousands of years. The realm accumulated like this naturally had huge flaws. For example, One-Legged knew almost nothing about the power of law. Another example was that One-Legged, who was at the peak of the unification stage, only had the combat power of the middle stage of the Dongshu stage. Therefore, One-Legged chose to use the power bestowed by the demon bug to crush the spaceship of Qin Xuan and the others from thousands of miles away. When Knight Serenity and the others wanted to fight desperately, he used the translucent cube to seal them. By the way, the translucent cube also came from the demon bug. It was the saliva secreted by the demon bug. Every time the demon bug ate, it would flow out. One-Leg collected it and refined it into that appearance. It was very useful and very intimidating. It was worth mentioning that if it were not for the protection of the demon bug saliva, One-Leg should have died under the thunder tribulation controlled by Qin Xuan. This time, One-Legged originally wanted to bring everyone back and hand them over to the demon bug to deal with. However, he did not expect that Qin Xuan would suddenly transcend the tribulation and ruin his plan. One-Legged, who had been trying his best to avoid a head-on confrontation with everyone, was exposed in the end. One-Legged had always remembered Qin Xuan, remembered the person who cut off his leg and caused him to be exiled. However, he never thought that he would reunite with Qin Xuan in such a special way, so he did not recognize Qin Xuan at all. If Qin Xuan did not take the initiative to mention it, he would still be in the dark. At this time, facing Qin Xuan, the person who had harmed him again and again, One-Legged was furious. Today, even if he had to pay the price of his life, he would kill Qin Xuan. Pucci, a black insect the length of an index finger, crawled out of the One-Legged man's mouth. It wriggled its fat body, opened its mouth, and bit down on the space imprisoning the One-Legged man. It actually bit down on a piece of space. Seeing this scene, Qin Xuan's expression suddenly changed. What is this? Just as Qin Xuan was thinking of this, black bugs drilled out of One-Legged's nostrils, ears, arms, and even abdomen one after another. Every time a black Zerg drilled out, One-Legged's aura would drop a little until he reached the nascent soul stage. The number of black bugs that drilled out of One-Leg's body reached 21. At this time, everyone had already understood that the source of One-Leg's power was these black bugs. "You all have to die." One-Leg stared at Chuan and said the last sentence in his life, a curse. Chapter 1190. One-Legged was dead, but before he died, he left the 21 clones of the devil insects in his body to Chuan and the others. Looking at the devil insects gnawing at the confined space and about to break free, everyone's expression became extremely solemn. Obviously, no one thought that the 21 clones of the devil insects would be easy to deal with. These insects can gnaw on space. As far as I know, only devil insects have this ability. Bela said to everyone in a very serious tone. Devil insects are ancient, strange insects that have existed since the beginning of the world. It is said that before Zerg occupied the Sage Monarch continent, devil insects were the masters of the continent. These insects eat everything and are immune to all attacks. Hearing Bela's words, everyone's expression suddenly became a little unsightly. If what Bela said was true, then wouldn't they have no way to deal with the 20 or so devil insects? I've also heard of the legends of devil insects. These shouldn't be the main bodies of devil insects, but clones, Argentin suddenly said to everyone. If they are clones, then it will be much easier to deal with them. Chuan immediately looked at Argentin and asked, "Do you have any ideas?" Argentin turned to look at Chuan and said, "Let's run before they break free." Chuan, whoosh. Everyone listened to Argentin's idea and took advantage of the fact that the 21 devil insect clones had not yet broken free from the confined space to run away as fast as they could. Originally, Chuan wanted to use the space travel technique to lead everyone to escape, but Bela and Argentin stopped him. The devil insects were extremely sensitive to the law of space. If Chuan used the space travel technique, it was very likely that it would attract the attention of the devil insect clones, and they would be locked on too. In that case, the loss would outweigh the gain. After everyone flew tens of thousands of miles away as fast as they could, the 21 devil insect clones finally broke free from the confined space. They paused in the air for a moment, then quickly chased after Chuan and the others according to the orders left behind by One-Leg before he died. The devil insect clones flew very fast, like black lightning, and arrived behind Chuan and the others in the blink of an eye. Then, they suddenly accelerated and rushed toward Chuan. Seeing this, Chuan immediately used the space travel technique to send the 21 devil insect clones flying over tens of thousands of miles away. Chuan's forced decision made the devil insect clones excited. They love the law of space the most. Crack, crack, accompanied by the hair-raising sound of space shattering. The 21 devil insect clones bit through space and wriggled in front of Chuan and the others from tens of thousands of miles away, blocking their path. Seeing this scene, everyone's expressions became extremely gloomy. What should we do? We can't seem to get rid of them. Yi frowned as he looked at the devil insect avatar. He tried to spit out a ball of dragon breath at the devil insect avatar. When the blazing dragon breath touched the devil insect avatar, a ripple suddenly appeared. Then, the dragon breath disappeared, and the size of the devil insect avatar shrunk from the thickness of a finger to the thickness of 2 fingers. Obviously, the devil insect avatar had devoured the power of the dragon breath. Bela stopped Knight Serenity, who wanted to continue attacking, and said to Knight Serenity, "It's useless. Our attacks won't have any effect except to make these devil insect clones stronger. Are we just going to sit here and wait for death?" While Knight Serenity spoke, the devil insect clones had already emerged from space and shot toward Chuan. Chuan's figure flickered continuously, trying to distance himself from the devil insect clones, but he could not do so. As a last resort, Chuan used lightning escape and forcibly opened a distance. "Their target is me. Go!" At this time, the 21 devil insects were chasing behind Chuan and did not attack anyone else. Obviously, Chuan was the main target of these devil insect clones. Before they devoured Chuan, they were not interested in others. Everyone saw that the 21 devil insect clones were chasing Chuan. While they were worried about Chuan, they did not know how to help him. When they heard that Chuan wanted them to go first, they looked at Chuan with conflicted gazes. They wanted to stay and help Chuan, but they did not know where to start. At this moment, Lu Zi had already made her own attempt. She activated the purple star divine pupil and used dream blossoms again. Dream blossoms. With Lu Zi's soft shout, lavender flowers suddenly grew on the devil insect clones chasing Chuan. With the growth of the flowers, the speed of the devil insects rushing toward Chuan suddenly became much slower. However, they did not stop and still followed closely behind Chuan. They're devouring dreams. Lu Zi was a little shocked. She did not expect the devil insect clones to be able to devour dreams. However, although the devil insect clones could devour dreams, as long as the flowers did not wither, they could not get rid of the dreams. At least for the time being, Chuan could breathe a sigh of relief and seize the time to find countermeasures. Should we try to stuff these devil insect clones to death? Knight Serenity suddenly proposed a bold idea. She did not believe that these devil insect clones could devour all kinds of powers without limit. There must be a limit, and once this limit was exceeded, the devil insect clones would most likely explode. However, Knight Serenity's proposal was opposed by everyone because no one was sure if this would have the opposite effect. They did not dare to gamble, and they could not afford to gamble. Just as everyone was thinking about countermeasures, the dream flowers growing on the devil insect clones gradually began to wither. It would not be long before these devil insect clones would leave the dreams and return to reality. At that time, they would still bite Chuan, and dream blossoms might not be able to trap them. Seeing this scene, everyone's complexion became ugly, including Chuan. However, at this moment, a round figure suddenly drilled out from between Chuan's eyebrows. A pair of cute big eyes looked at the 21 devil insect avatars not far away. It was as if it had seen the most delicious meal in the world, sparkling brightly. Delicious! With a burst of tender cheers, the little armored dragon's fat body appeared in front of the devil insect avatars in a flash. It stretched out its chubby hands, hugged one of the devil insect avatars, and opened its mouth to bite it fiercely. Everyone's eyes widened when they saw the little armored dragon eating the devil insects. Even Chuan did not expect things to develop like this. Chapter 1191. What is this? Everyone was stunned when they saw the little armored dragon eating the devil insect avatars. They had just seen the little armored dragon come out from between Chuan's eyebrows. This is the little armored dragon. Don't worry. The person who spoke was Lu Zi. She had known about the existence of the little armored dragon a long time ago. Although she had not seen the little armored dragon for a long time, and the little armored dragon had grown a lot, she still recognized it at a glance. This is Zerg's Sacred Armor King, right? How can Chuan have such a thing? Vela had seen the Sacred Armor King before, but the little armored dragon seemed to be different from the other Sacred Armor Kings she had seen before. Chuan pursed his lips and said to everyone, "The little armored dragon is indeed the Sacred Armor King, but it is different from the other Sacred Armor Kings. It is a mutated existence." When everyone heard Chuan's words, they believed Chuan's explanation. However, they had never heard of the Sacred Armor King having the ability to devour devil insect avatars. Logically speaking, the devil insect should be above the Sacred Armor King in level. Can it do it? Knight Serenity glanced at the cute little armored dragon worriedly. At this time, the little armored dragon was still devouring the first devil insect avatar and seemed to be struggling. Knight Serenity's question was also the question in everyone's mind. They did not want the little armored dragon to be devoured by the devil insect avatars that had left the dream. After all, there were 21 devil insect avatars. We can only choose to believe it. Chuan glanced at the little armored dragon with a subtle gaze. Ever since he met the little armored dragon, it had never lost in terms of eating. Qin Chuan believed that the little armored dragon would not let him down this time. At this time, the dream flowers growing on the 21 devil insect avatars had completely withered. The 21 devil insect avatars left the dream and returned to reality. They should have continued to pursue Qin Chuan, but because of the unexpected appearance of the little armored dragon, the 21 devil insect avatars immediately went crazy. The 21 devil insect avatars, which were already extremely aggressive, erupted with great hostility when facing the little armored dragon. They pounced on the little armored dragon, instantly crawled all over the little armored dragon's body, and began to crazily bite the shell of the little armored dragon. The devil insect avatar in the little armored dragon's mouth struggled violently, not wanting to be swallowed by the little armored dragon so easily. In the distance, everyone's eyes were filled with worry as they watched the little armored dragon and the devil bug avatar biting each other. The little armored dragon was furious. He did not expect that the half-eaten devil bug avatar would still be so fierce. He immediately opened his mouth and swallowed the small half of the devil bug avatar into his stomach. After swallowing the small half of the devil bug avatar, the little armored dragon immediately reached out and tore off another devil bug avatar from his shoulder, opened his mouth, and bit off the head of the devil bug avatar. Fortunately, the devil bug avatar was an energy creature. Otherwise, the little armored dragon's bite would have splashed blood and mucus all over his body. The little armored dragon had achieved some results, and the devil bug avatar was no exception. The 7 or 8 devil bugs lying on the little armored dragon's abdomen were about to bite through the shell of the little armored dragon's abdomen. At that time, they could attack the little armored dragon's abdomen, and the little armored dragon would be in danger. Just as everyone was worried that the devil bugs would break through the shell of the little armored dragon, the little armored dragon suddenly spun on the spot like a top. The devil bug avatars desperately wanted to catch the little armored dragon, but the little armored dragon threw them away with brute force. During this process, the little armored dragon had already stuffed the second devil bug avatar into his stomach. Whoosh! The 19 devil bug avatars that were thrown away once again rushed angrily at the little armored dragon and fought endlessly with the little armored dragon. However, as the little armored dragon devoured their companions one after another, they could no longer pose the slightest threat to the little armored dragon. They could only bare their fangs and brandish their claws to express their anger and unwillingness before finally being swallowed into the little armored dragon's stomach. In less than 20 minutes, the little armored dragon had devoured all 21 devil bug avatars. When the little armored dragon patted its belly and burped in satisfaction, half of the devil bug unwillingly wanted to get out of the little armored dragon's mouth, but the little armored dragon pressed it back in. Seeing this scene, everyone did not know whether to say that the little armored dragon was cute or ferocious. It looked so stupid and cute, but it did things so ferociously. The crisis is probably over. Everyone looked at the little armored dragon, who was trying to digest the devil bug avatars with its mouth closed, and they looked at each other. No one knew what the current situation was. When it was almost done digesting, the little armored dragon flew to Qin Chuan's side and then crawled into Qin Chuan's brain with its butt sticking out. At this time, Qin Chuan also realized that the threat posed by the devil bug had been resolved by the little armored dragon. "We are safe." After hearing Qin Chuan's words, the expressions on everyone's faces immediately became relaxed. The resolution of the crisis was a good thing for each of them. Since the crisis has been resolved, let's leave the holy cluster and return to the celestial cluster as soon as possible. Lucy looked at Qin Chuan and made her suggestion. No one knew if the death of the devil bug avatars would attract the main body of the devil bug, so it was better to leave here as soon as possible. Qin Chuan nodded. He also felt that this place was dangerous and should not stay for long. So he said to everyone, "I will use space travel to take everyone out of here quickly." Northwest of the Sage Monarch continent, the Devil Planet. Asterisk hiss. Asterisk accompanied by a sharp hiss. The huge devil bug roared and rushed out of the cave. Its eyes were extremely cruel as it looked into the distance, as if something had happened in that direction that made it angry. In the past, when the devil bug roared, people would always come to investigate the situation. But this time, no one cared about the devil bug because everyone on the devil planet had been transferred away by one-legged, and all of them had died at the hands of Chuan and the others. No one could calm the devil bug's irritable mood. In its rage, the devil bug opened its bloody mouth and viciously bit the space in front of it, and then its huge body suddenly burrowed into the broken space. However, soon, the devil bug's unwilling roar came from the broken space. The distance was too far, and it could not catch up with Chuan and the others. It could only watch as Chuan and the others used space travel to quickly leave the holy cluster through the interstellar transportation gate. Roar. The devil bug retreated to the devil planet and roared. Its body suddenly swelled, and it was about to burst the devil planet. Finally, the devil bug's abnormal behavior attracted the attention of Zerg on the Sage Monarch continent. Chapter 1192. Messy Rockstar. Chuan and the others were sitting in a private room in a restaurant. Everyone's face was full of smiles. They had caused a huge wave in the holy cluster and escaped unscathed. This was something worth celebrating. Our trip to the holy cluster has been successfully completed. Now it's time for us to go back. When Chuan said this, his eyes were mainly focused on Bela and Caro. Knight Serenity and Argentin were naturally going to leave with them, but Bela and Caro had completed their mission. If Bela and Caro wanted to leave, Chuan would not stop them. Facing Chuan's gaze, Bela and Caro understood what Chuan meant. The two sisters looked at each other and then said to Chuan, "Sir, we are willing to follow in your footsteps." Hearing Bela and Caro's words, Chuan did not immediately agree. Instead, he said to them seriously, "I can tell you the truth. If you want to follow me, you will definitely encounter greater danger in the future. It will definitely not be easier than before. With Bela's current strength, you can live a stable life anywhere you want. There's no need to follow me just to repay my kindness." Hearing Chuan's words, Bela said very seriously, "Sir, we have already made the decision long ago. We are willing to follow you. Please don't drive us away." Caro also nodded and said to Chuan, "We will follow you not only to repay your kindness." Seeing Bela and Caro's resolute attitude, Chuan said, "In that case, you two can temporarily follow Lil Z." After settling the matter with Caro and Bela, Chuan looked at everyone and said, "Today, I want to have a frank talk with everyone." Hearing Chuan's words, everyone's expression became a little serious. They all knew very well that what Chuan was going to say next must be very important. First of all, you have seen before that Lil Z and I both have the bloodline of the true dragon. In the previous battle, Chuan and Lu Zi had both transformed into their dragon forms and were seen by everyone. This was something that could no longer be hidden. In that case, he might as well be frank and open. When everyone heard Chuan's words, the expression on their faces became a little subtle. Their eyes could not help but switch back and forth between Chuan and Lu Zi. To be honest, except for Knight Serenity, who already knew some things, the others were shocked by Chuan and Lu Zi's sudden transformation into their dragon forms. The true dragon that existed in the legends suddenly appeared in front of them one day. The impact was really too great. They had always been curious about whether Chuan and Lu Zi were the legendary dragon clan, but they had never had the opportunity to ask this question. Now that Chuan took the initiative to talk about it, their curiosity was finally satisfied. However, Lil Z and I are not pure dragon clan. Logically speaking, Lil Z and I should be human. It was not easy for everyone to accept the fact that Chuan and Lu Zi had the bloodline of the true dragon. They thought that Chuan and Lu Zi were the legendary dragon clan, but no one expected that Chuan and Lu Zi were actually human. Human? Even Knight Serenity was stunned. Chuan and Lu Zi were actually human? Human with the bloodline of the true dragon? Everyone looked at Chuan in a daze. How did they suddenly become human? Facing the confused crowd, Qin smiled and said, "It's a long story. I'll make it short. Lil Z and I both obtained the bloodline of the true dragon by some chance. So we have the ability to transform into a dragon. But in fact, we are both human." Hearing Qin explanation, everyone was still confused. Whether it was the human clan or the dragon clan, they were all races that existed in legends. They had never heard of a human with the bloodline of the true dragon. Now, such people had appeared, and there were two of them sitting in front of them. It was really difficult for them to accept it for a while. The human clan and the demon clan have disappeared from the universe for a long time, but the human clan and the demon clan have not perished. Instead, they are recuperating in a secret place. What I'm going to do next is to lead the human clan and the demon clan back to the universe. This has always been my wish. I didn't have the ability to realize it in the past, but it's different now. I've reached the form synthesis stage and have enough strength to protect them. So I want to bring them back. Speaking of this, Qin paused for a moment and then said to everyone, "This is a very risky thing. If some supreme existence of the crossing calamity stage, or even the ultimate existence wants to attack me, it will be very difficult for me to resist. If you continue to stay by my side, you will also be implicated. So, I'll give you choice now. Stay or leave." Qin chose to tell them this after careful consideration. Now, the existence of the land of exile was something that could no longer be concealed. In addition, he was now strong enough to protect the human clan and the demon clan. So, he decided to lead the human clan and the demon clan back to the universe. However, no matter how strong Qin was, he was still only a mid-form synthesis stage overlord. Perhaps no one in the form synthesis stage was a match for him. But if a supreme existence of the crossing calamity stage, or even the ultimate existence, wanted to attack the human clan and the demon clan, there was nothing he could do. Hearing Qin words, Lu Zi frowned slightly and said, "Are we going to return now? Isn't it too early?" Qin shook his head and said to Lu Zi, "It's not early. It's really not early. Zerg has always been eyeing the land of exile. He has always wanted to conquer the land of exile and destroy the human clan and the demon clan. In order to find me, he was willing to destroy the entire Terong city. No one knows what he will do in the future. The land of exile's special laws of heaven and earth can protect the two races for a while, but at the same time, it will also limit the development of the two races. If we stay in a land of exile, the two races will never have the chance to rise again." Qin paused for a moment before continuing. "Moreover, we caused quite a commotion in the holy cluster this time. It's impossible to hide from Zerg. They may be able to lock onto us soon and respond. We have to bring the two races out before Zerg makes his move." Qin looked deeply at Lu Zi and said in a deep voice, "Only by walking out of the land of exile can we see hope and see the road ahead. This road can't be paved by just me and you alone. We need more people to step forward to flatten this road. We can't protect them for their entire lives." Chapter 1193. Qin's idea was very simple and his goal was clear. He could lead the human race and the demon race out of the land of exile and return to the universe. However, he couldn't fully shoulder the responsibility of the human race and the demon race. This wasn't something that he could do alone or with the help of a few people. This was a long-term task that required more people to step forward. Now, what they needed to do was the first step, which was also the most difficult step. Let more like-minded people step forward. It didn't matter if their realms were low or they didn't have strength. People would always grow. Before these people grew, Qin would act as a big umbrella and protect the two races as much as possible. Perhaps in the past, many people had regarded Qin as a savior and a great hero. However, from beginning to end, Qin didn't think of himself as a savior or a great hero. Everything he did was within the scope of his ability. He wouldn't do anything that was beyond his ability. Although Qin always boasted that he was a person with great luck, if a person relied on luck for everything, then that person would die sooner or later. Qinchuan didn't think that he could live forever. Perhaps one day, he would leave this world. However, he hoped that before he left, the human race and the demon race wouldn't rely on him and wouldn't need his support. This way, he could die with peace of mind. It sounded a bit grand, but in the end, whether it was the human race or the demon race, who didn't have such a grand wish? The only difference between Qinchuan and those people was that Qinchuan was stronger and could do more things. Apart from this, he was no different from most people. Lucy was silent for a long time. She was thinking about what Qinchuan said earlier. She could understand Qinchuan, but she always felt that Qinchuan was a bit too hasty. However, if Lucy knew about Qinchuan's experience during the tribulation and knew about the existence of the human face, then perhaps she wouldn't think that Qinchuan was too hasty. Qinchuan just wanted to do as much as possible before he encountered any mishaps. In the end, Lu Zi decided to put aside her worries for the time being and fully support Qinchuan. Qinchuan, I support your decision. Qinchuan smiled when he heard this. He turned his head to look at the others and said, Now, it's time for all of you to make a decision. I will not force you to stay. Regardless of whether it is Yiyu or Insu, all of you have the right to choose. Knight Serenity and Argentin, who were called out by Qinchuan, understood that Qinchuan still needed their help before he reached the body integration stage. But now, Qinchuan had reached the body integration stage, so their existence was meaningless. So now, Qinchuan was willing to return their freedom to them. Insu looked guiltily at Qinchuan and said, You were the one who saved me and protected the Yin clan. I owe you. I should have helped you wholeheartedly. But I'm sorry, I still have the Yin clan behind me that I need to take care of. Hearing Argentin's words, Qinchuan didn't hesitate and immediately canceled the slave contract between him and Argentin. Then he said to Argentin, I can understand you, so I'm willing to return your freedom. Sensing the disappearance of the slave contract, Argentin looked at Qinchuan with a complicated expression and said, Thank you, Qinchuan. Qinchuan nodded and turned to Knight Serenity and asked, What about you? Just a moment ago, when he canceled Argentin's slave contract, Qinchuan also canceled Knight Serenity's slave contract. Knight Serenity pursed her lips and replied, Sir, Knight Serenity is willing to continue serving Sir. Knight Serenity's situation was different from Argentin's. Argentin had the Yin clan to take care of, but Knight Serenity was alone. As for the pirates on the necromancy, they were just strangers who met by chance. Without Knight Serenity, they would soon seek refuge with other experts. Therefore, Knight Serenity didn't have any feelings for them. In short, Knight Serenity was alone, so following Qinchuan might be her best choice. After all, Qinchuan had the true dragon bloodline. In terms of bloodline, he was her superior. Qinchuan nodded and looked at Bela and Karo. For Bela and Karo, this was their second chance to make a choice today. However, they didn't hesitate and made the same choice. Sir, we sisters are still willing to serve you. Since that's the case, let's part ways here. Qinchuan turned his head to look at Insu and said, I can only respect your choice. I will absolutely not be dissatisfied with it. Argentin looked at Qinchuan deeply and said, If you don't mind, I am willing to represent the Yin clan and become allies with the human clan. We will advance and retreat together. Qinchuan laughed and said, Of course I am willing. Now that the matter had been settled, while everyone was relieved of some of their worries, some other worries arose in their hearts. During the meal, everyone was quiet. Even Qinchuan, who always liked to talk and was good at adjusting the atmosphere, was silent. For cultivators, there was no difference between day and night. They could still eat, drink, play, or cultivate. However, when they weren't cultivating, Qinchuan was used to sleeping at night. This was the first time Qinchuan had insomnia at night. It was funny that a cultivator, a body integration stage cultivator, would suffer from insomnia. What are you thinking about? LVZ walked to the balcony and looked at Qinchuan, who was standing on a balcony and gazing into the distance. Even at night, the messy rock star was still brightly lit and bustling with noise and excitement. To the shopkeepers, there was no such thing as closing time. After hearing Lu Zi's words, Qin Chuan faintly said, "I am reflecting on myself." Qin Chuan was indeed reflecting on himself. Although he had made a decision and decided to act according to his plan, it didn't mean that he was completely right. In the land of exile, not everyone was willing to come out and wander. Maybe some people wanted to stay in the land of exile and continue to be the king of the mountain. They didn't want to suddenly fall from a lofty peak expert to an ant that could be crushed at any time. Similarly, the revival of the human clan and the demon clan was too far away for some people. Qin Chuan was very clear that once he went back, he would definitely be supported by a group of people. He had to be responsible for these people. Therefore, he had to do his best to avoid some things from happening. Therefore, he needed to reflect on himself and find a loophole to plug it. Chapter 1194. The next morning, Qin Chuan and the rest parted ways at Messy Rocks. Argentin set off to return to Stansos, while Qin Chuan and the rest headed directly to Tron Nebula, preparing to return to the land of exile. Bela was rich, so she bought the fastest war-class spaceship at a high price. It was called Lightning. With lightning speed, it would take them at least 4 years to return to Tron Nebula from Messy Rocks. Qin Chuan was curious. How did Zerd arrive at Tron Nebula so quickly? Bela explained to Qin Chuan that Zerd arrived at Tron Nebula so quickly because Zerd's spaceship was an aircraft carrier-class spaceship, which had the ability to perform ultra-long-distance interstellar warp. The Lightning's interstellar warp distance was only about 1/20th of that of an aircraft carrier-class spaceship. Therefore, the best way for Qin Chuan and the rest was to return to Stansos first, then use the Tian people's teleportation portal to teleport directly to Tron Nebula. If we knew we were going to return to Stansos, we would have gone with Argentin. Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan with a smile. It was rare for Qin Chuan to make a mistake. She always thought that Qin Chuan had a flawless plan. Qin Chuan looked awkwardly at Lu Zi and shrugged helplessly. Even a wise man would make mistakes sometimes, and he was not a wise man. It took 19 days to return to Stansos from Messy Rocks through 13 interstellar portals. When Qin Chuan and the rest returned to Stansos, it happened to be the time of the Celestial Cluster's Overlord Gathering, which was held once every 100 years. The Overlord Gathering was a platform provided by the Tian people for all the universe overlords of the Celestial Cluster to communicate. Universe overlords who did not meet often could use this opportunity to exchange information or barter. As the organizer, the Tian people did not ask for any remuneration, and they would also provide security for the transactions between the universe overlords. Therefore, every time the gathering was held, universe overlords from all over the world would return to Stansos to participate in the gathering. In the past, although Qin Chuan's power was comparable to that of a universe overlord, he had not reached the form synthesis stage. Therefore, he did not care much about the gathering. Now that he had reached the form synthesis stage and become one of the overlords, he naturally wanted to participate in such an event. Just as Qin Chuan was about to ask Thelon or Sharmilla about the situation, Thelon found him first. Qin Chuan was not surprised that Thelon took the initiative to visit him. After all, Stansos was the Tian people's territory. It was difficult for him to hide his presence from the Tian people. Moreover, he did not deliberately hide his whereabouts. Congratulations. Thelon congratulated Qin Chuan as soon as he saw Qin Chuan. Obviously, he already knew that Qin Chuan had reached the form synthesis stage. Not long ago, I met Argentin and learned from her that you have reached the form synthesis stage. Thelon sighed with emotion. I remember that when we first met, you were only at the middle stage of the Dongxi realm. Your speed of improvement is too fast. When Qin Chuan heard this, he chuckled and said to Tai Long, in adversity, people always yearn for more power. Upon hearing Qin Chuan's words, Thelon looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle expression and asked, do you think your current strength is enough to help you walk out of adversity? Qin Chuan smiled and replied, if it's just me alone, it's naturally enough. But if there are more people, it's not enough. It's still lacking a little. If Qin Chuan wanted to protect the human race and the demon race, he had to at least reach the crossing calamity stage and become one of the few supreme existences in the universe. Only then would he be qualified and have more confidence. Thelon already knew Qin Chuan's identity and understood what Qin Chuan meant. He smiled and said to Qin Chuan, "Tehran City is now yours. You can do whatever you want anytime." Qin Chuan came back this time with the intention of meeting the elders and telling them about this matter. Now that he heard Thelon's words, Qin Chuan understood that Thelon was here to pass the message on behalf of the elders. In that case, there was no need for him to make another trip. Then I'll have to trouble you to thank the elders on my behalf. Qin Chuan smiled and said to Thelon, "Also, I want to attend the gathering of the overlords. Can I?" Thelon laughed and said, "Of course, there's no problem. All the universe overlords in the celestial cluster are qualified to attend the gathering of the overlords. This is also the main reason why I'm looking for you this time." Qin Chuan was curious and asked, "Is there anything special that I need to pay attention to?" Thelon shook his head and answered, "It's nothing special. It's just an unwritten rule. I want to know what Brother Qin wants from the gathering of the overlords and what you want to trade." Qin Chuan understood. Thelon wanted to do a statistical survey so that he could make the necessary arrangements during the gathering of the overlords. This would save everyone time and effort. However, did the Tian people really have to go to this extent? Thelon seemed to have seen through Qin Chuan's doubts. He said to Qin Chuan, "This gathering of the overlords is a little special. Other than the normal exchanges and trades, we Tian people also want to use this opportunity to recruit some people." Qin Chuan was surprised to hear this. He asked, "Are the Tian people short of people?" Thelon smiled bitterly and said to Qin Chuan, "Originally, we weren't short of people. However, not long ago, when we left Pegasus Star, we had a conflict with the Protoss. Some of our people died in the conflict. Recently, the Protoss has been recruiting overlords from all over the universe. Just in case we have to follow suit. We hope that we can use this gathering to leave a good impression on all the overlords so that we can recruit them." After listening to Thelon's explanation, Qin Chuan couldn't help but feel awkward. Speaking of which, the conflict between the Tian people and the Protoss was because of him. However, this didn't mean that the Tian people didn't have any problems at all. After all, the Tian people were the ones who traded Tron Nebula with him in exchange for Province's death. Strictly speaking, the Tian people were at least 50% responsible. If that wasn't the case, Thelon wouldn't have been so friendly to him. "Then what can I do for you?" No matter what, the Tian people were now important allies of Qin Chuan. If the Tian people needed help, Qin Chuan wouldn't mind helping them to the best of his ability. Chapter 1195. Thelon had been waiting for Qin Chuan to say this. There will be several talisman array masters from other star clusters participating in this Overlord's gathering. They are all 7th level talisman array masters, and what they desire the most is a 7th level talisman array master. Thelon looked at Qin Chuan with a subtle expression and said, "We hope that you will allow us to use the 7th level battle arrays you have provided us as a trade condition to recruit these talisman array masters." There was an agreement between Qin Chuan and the Tian people. When Qin Chuan reached the body integration stage, he would provide the Tian people with 7th level battle arrays of various attributes. The Tian people had never forgotten this agreement, and neither had Qin Chuan. However, Qin Chuan had only agreed to provide the 7th level battle arrays to the Tian people, and not to others. Therefore, before using these battle arrays, the Tian people had to first obtain Qin Chuan's approval. Qin Chuan naturally had no objection to this. He chuckled and said to Thelon, "If they are willing to join the Tian people, then they will naturally become part of the Tian people. It is reasonable for us to provide them with battle arrays. I have no objection. You Tian people can make the decision yourselves." Thelon immediately felt relieved after hearing Qin Chuan's words. After all, those battle arrays were still in the hands of Qin Chuan and had not yet been handed over to the Tian people. Now that Qin Chuan had no objection, Thelon took the opportunity to ask Qinchuan to give him the method of engraving battle arrays. Qinchuan did not refuse. He straightforwardly handed over the 7th-level battle arrays of various attributes to Thelon, including the spatial battle array. Thelon carefully put away the engraving method of the spatial battle array and said to Qinchuan, "Except for the direct descendants of the Tian people, we will never teach this spatial battle array to anyone else." Qinchuan smiled and said, "I think so too. It is more appropriate for such an important battle array to be in the hands of our own people." Thelon received Qinchuan's reply and got what he wanted. After agreeing to go to the gathering together, he took his leave. Not long after Thelon left, Sharmila arrived. "Qinchuan, you have gone too far." Sharmila had just entered the room and shouted at Qinchuan. Qinchuan looked at Sharmila in confusion. He didn't seem to have done anything to offend Sharmila. Sharmila walked up to Qinchuan angrily and said, "Your cultivation is obviously lower than mine. Why did you reach the form synthesis stage earlier than me? I was severely taught a lesson by my teacher. He ordered me to reach the form synthesis stage within 3 years. Otherwise, he would punish me by sending me to the Tiandao mountain to practice in seclusion." Hearing Sharmila's words, Qinchuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "You can't blame me for this. I can't suppress my cultivation and wait for you slowly." Sharmila looked around and suddenly asked Qinchuan quietly, "Do you have any special tricks to improve your strength quickly? Can you share it with me?" Looking at Sharmila's sneaky look, Qinchuan couldn't help but feel a little amused. When he first met Sharmila, he thought Sharmila was a cold, arrogant, and strong princess. However, as they gradually became familiar with each other, he found that Sharmila's brain circuit was sometimes very strange. She didn't put on any airs of a princess and had always been high and mighty. "I don't have any clever tricks to teach you." Qinchuan smiled. "Cultivation is not something that can be achieved overnight, and it can't be taken a detour. It's more practical to be down to earth and take one step at a time." Hearing Qinchuan's words, Sharmila immediately curled her lips and said, "It's so annoying. Why do you like to preach to others like my teacher? You're young but mature." Sharmila glared at Qinchuan and then went to find Lu Zi. She didn't want to listen to Qinchuan's lecture. In a luxurious hotel in the 66th district, dressed in a red robe, Sam stood on the balcony and looked calmly at the scenery and people in the distance. In his opinion, these beautiful scenery should belong to the one God sect, and these people should believe in the one true God, atheists. As the cardinal of the one God sect, Sam rarely left the Deus cluster. However, this time, he had no choice but to leave the Deus cluster and come to Stansos. This was because there was a person he had to kill. Qinchuan. Sam had always remembered this name, not only because Qinchuan was the ferocious beast who had killed the great divine prince, Province, but also because Qinchuan had killed 20 overlords of the combination stage of the One God sect. Among them, 4 high priests had also been indirectly killed by Qinchuan. Even the powerful One God sect felt distressed at such a huge loss. However, apart from feeling distressed, there was more anger. It had been too many years since someone had dared to challenge the dignity of the One God sect. If they couldn't make Qinchuan pay the price, then the One God sect would be too ashamed to preach in other star clusters in the future. This time, Pope St. Baudelo had given Sam a death order. He had to kill Qinchuan no matter what method he had to use. Therefore, Sam came to Stansos and patiently waited for Qinchuan's return. Finally, God didn't disappoint those who waited. He had been waiting for news of Qinchuan's return. "We didn't receive an invitation to the gathering of the overlords in 10 days. The person who spoke was a high priest standing behind Sam. His name was Jie, and he was a good friend of Lucas. This time, he had volunteered to follow Sam to Stansos, hoping to avenge Lucas with his own hands. When they came to Stansos, they did not inform the Tian people openly. It could be said that they had snuck in quietly. Although it was not difficult for the Tian people to discover them with their abilities, the Tian people did not take the initiative to contact them, as if nothing had happened. Before this, they thought that this was a good thing, But when the news of the gathering of the Overlord spread, and they learned that Chuan would also be attending the gathering, things became a little awkward. According to common sense, they were qualified to participate in the Overlord's gathering. But because they sneaked into stanzos and the sky race deliberately ignored them, they didn't receive an invitation. And without an invitation, if they wanted to force their way in, the sky race could legitimately make a move on them. Even killing them wouldn't be a problem. Therefore, they were now faced with a dilemma, and that was whether or not they should reveal their identities. If they revealed their identities, they would be able to get an invitation to the gathering of the Overlords. Publicly attacking Chuan had its advantages, but at the same time, there were also disadvantages. That was, Chuan might not attend the gathering and find a place to hide. Then, it would be very difficult for them to find Chuan again. If they did not reveal their identities, then the Tian people would be able to find trouble with them and obstruct them from doing things. Therefore, they were in a dilemma. Chapter 1196. Tribulation Realm was in a dilemma, but he was lucky because he was only the high priest and did not have the authority to make decisions. The person who should be in a dilemma was Sam. Sam was silent for a moment after hearing Tribulation Realm's words. After weighing the pros and cons, he said to Tribulation Realm, "Go and inform the Tian people that Cardinal Sam of the One God religion is here for a friendly visit. He hopes to participate in the Overlord gathering and preach the teachings of the One God religion." Tribulation Realm hesitated when he heard Sam's words. But won't Chuan be scared away? They had hidden their identities and sneaked into stanzos because they were worried that they would scare away Chuan. If they revealed their identities now, it would be troublesome if Chuan escaped after hearing the news. Sam said faintly, "You don't have to worry about that. Just do as I say." Although Sam had never met Chuan, he could tell from the information he had collected about Chuan that Chuan was a very confident and smart person. He would never avoid a problem that could be solved, and he could always make a rational decision when faced with a difficult problem. Now that Chuan had advanced to the combination stage, he believed that Chuan would not run away again. Tribulation Realm immediately lowered his head and said, "Yes, I understand." Soon, Tribulation Realm revealed his identity to the Tian people through the One God religion's channels. He hoped to visit stanzos and participate in the Overlord gathering 10 days later to preach the teachings of the One God religion. The person in charge of handling this matter and receiving Tribulation Realm was Thelon. Thelon and Tribulation Realm had a brief chat. Both sides were very happy, but after Tribulation Realm left in satisfaction, Thelon's expression became serious. As early as 2 months ago, he already knew that Chuan and the others had come to stanzos. They had been living in Area 66 and investigating the matter of Chuan. However, at that time, Chuan wasn't in stanzos, and the Tian people didn't want to have another conflict with the Protoss, so they pretended that nothing had happened. When Chuan returned, Thelon had thought that the Protoss would make things difficult for Chuan, but he did not expect the Protoss to make such a blatant show of goodwill in the name of the One God religion and request to participate in the Overlord party 10 days later. In the face of such a request, Thelon had no reason to refuse, nor could he refuse. Therefore, after sending Tribulation Realm away, Thelon immediately set off to find Chuan and explain the matter to Chuan. After hearing about the situation with the Protoss from Thelon, Chuan chuckled and said, "If I remember correctly, the cardinals of the One God religion should be at the pinnacle of the combination realm, right?" Thelon nodded and said to Chuan, "The One God religion has a total of 12 cardinals, each of whom is at the pinnacle of the combination realm. This Chuan is ranked 6th among the 12 cardinals, so he's not weak." Hearing Thelon's words, Chuan smiled and said, "Just act according to the original plan. If the One God religion wants to make trouble for me, you don't have to worry too much. I'll handle it myself." Upon hearing this, Thelon was slightly stunned. Then, he looked at Chuan with a subtle expression and asked, "Are you confident?" Chuan nodded and said frankly, "If there's only one Sam, the One God religion won't be able to threaten me. Qin Chuan was very confident. He was no longer at the pinnacle of the insightful void realm. He had to rely on the power of the mysterious snake to deal with the one-god religion. Now, he was an overlord at the middle stage of the combination realm, with his own strength, not to mention Sam. Even if the Pope of the one-god religion, Saint Baudelaire, came in person, he would not be afraid. Of course, Qin Chuan would not say this out loud. After all, it was too arrogant. It was better to keep a low profile. If he really provoked Saint Baudelaire, it would be troublesome to deal with him. Seeing Qin Chuan so confident, Thelon was no longer worried. After a brief chat, he left. After Thelon left, Lu Zi came out and asked Qin Chuan, "Did the one-god religion come again?" Qin Chuan nodded and replied, "It seems that I didn't hurt the one-god religion enough the previous 2 times. This time, they lost another cardinal. They should know not to provoke me if they can. It's best not to provoke me." Lu Zi sat down beside Qin Chuan and asked, "Are you planning to use this matter to establish your authority?" Qin Chuan smiled and said to Lu Zi, "Little Z knows me best. That's right, I'm planning to use this matter to establish my authority. It's impossible to hide the fact that the human race and the demon race have returned to the universe. It's bound to attract the attention of many parties and even hostility and probing. If I can establish my authority with the help of a cardinal, then those people with ulterior motives will have to be careful of my revenge if they want to take action against the human race and the demon race. A person with no attachments is the scariest." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Lu Zi looked at Qin Chuan with some heartache and said, "It's been hard on you." Qin Chuan smiled and shook his head, saying, "It's not hard. It's never hard to do what I like." As the date of the Overlord gathering drew closer and closer, the list of overlords participating in the Overlord gathering was no longer a secret. Many overlords had already received the list in advance and knew the origins of some of the treasures that would appear at the gathering. In the past, the Overlord were most concerned about the treasures. However, this time, the overlords were most concerned about the enmity between the 2 parties. One party was the one-god religion, and the other party was naturally Qin Chuan. It was no secret that Qin Chuan had killed Province on the celestial planet. Although it had caused a stir at that time, not many overlords were concerned about it. However, after that, Qin Chuan had destroyed 300 oracles of the Protoss with the help of the mysterious snake on the Pegasus star. The last time a large number of overlords at the combination stage had fallen was more than 3,000 years ago. Since then, Qin Chuan had officially entered the sights of many overlords. At the same time, the news that Qin Chuan had killed 2 level 3 great beings from the Void Empire and the Dream Race also spread. A young man who could fight against overlords of the universe at the Dongshu stage was worthy of their attention and attention. After the incident on the Pegasus star, Qin Chuan had disappeared for a period of time. When he reappeared, he had already reached the combination stage. This shocked many overlords because Qin Chuan's progress was too fast. Now, the one-god religion had taken the initiative to reveal their identity and made it clear that they wanted to deal with Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan did not choose to avoid them. It could be said that he was quite confident. At this time, many overlords could not help but look forward to the meeting between Qin Chuan and Sam. It would definitely be exciting. Just as everyone was looking forward to it, the day of the Overlord gathering quietly arrived. Chapter 1197. The Overlord gathering was held in the 20th District. The 20th District was the most luxurious public area in Stansos. Every Overlord gathering was held here, and this time was no exception. The Overlord gathering would last for 10 days. During these 10 days, the overlords who came to participate in the gathering could freely enter and exit the 20th District to trade treasures or information. They could even work together to explore some ancient ruins. The Heaven race would not interfere and would only maintain the order of the gathering. When the gathering started, more than 10 overlords arrived at the 20th District. They sat in the luxurious hall and either closed their eyes to meditate or whispered to each other. These overlords had only reached the body fusion stage in recent years. Most of them were only at the early stage of the body fusion stage. Although there were only a few people in the hall, no one was surprised. This was because this had happened in the past. Overlords with powerful treasures or powerful cultivation would only show up a few days later. It was worth mentioning that under such circumstances, the overlords were allowed to bring a junior to the gathering to broaden their horizons. To the overlords, this gathering might not be a big deal, but to the juniors, being able to attend such a gathering was enough to brag about for 100 years. The juniors brought by the overlords who had arrived early gathered together. They observed the situation in the hall while chatting. The topic of their conversation was related to Qin Chuan. A Tian people girl who was dressed exquisitely looked at her companions and asked, "How many days do you think Qin Chuan will be here?" Although everyone knew that Qin Chuan had reached the body fusion stage and become an overlord of the universe, not many people knew that Qin Chuan had reached the middle stage of the body fusion stage. Therefore, in everyone's impression, Qin Chuan should be the same as the other overlords present. He was just a junior. Hearing the girl's words, a tall man from the red race wearing a white suit chuckled and said, "Qin Chuan may be strong, but he's only at the early stage of the body fusion stage. In my opinion, he'll be here tomorrow at the latest." That's not necessarily true. Qin Chuan was able to face off against an overlord when he was at the Dongshu stage. Now that he's reached the Dongshu stage, he must be even stronger. I estimate that he'll only show up on the 5th day. Someone objected. They felt that Qin Chuan wouldn't show up so early. The person who objected was from the blue race. The relationship between the blue race and the red race had never been harmonious. Everyone felt that the blue race objected, not because they understood Qin Chuan, but because they wanted to refute the red race. Why don't we make a bet? Hong Mang looked at the blue race with a cold gaze. Lan Yu looked at Hong Mang and said calmly, "No problem." "How do you want to bet?" "Let's bet on time. I bet that Qin Chuan won't show up until tomorrow at the latest." Hong Mang looked at Lan Yu. "If Qin Chuan doesn't show up tomorrow, you win." Lan Yu laughed and said, No. If Qin Chuan doesn't show up after 5 days, it'll be a draw. I won't take advantage of you." Lan Yu was very confident. No matter how strong Qin Chuan was, he couldn't wait until 5 days. After all, Qin Chuan was only a newcomer. "What's the bet?" Hong Mang looked at Lan Yu. "I can bet my red eagle." The red hawk was a unique pet of the red race. Although it wasn't very strong, it had outstanding abilities in scouting and alerting. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that every red race member who had a red hawk was the best scout in the world. As long as the red hawk was there, the enemy would have nowhere to hide. Hearing Hong Mang's words, everyone looked at him with shock. It wasn't easy for the red race to raise a mature red eagle. Hong Mang was actually willing to use his red eagle as a bet. This was a huge bet. Although Lan Yu was shocked, he was more happy because he felt that Hong Mang was bound to lose. If he could bring back a mature red eagle, he would definitely become the envy of the rest of the red race. "Since you're so sincere, I'll bet my blue armor." Wow! Hearing Lan Yu's words, everyone couldn't help but gasp. Blue armor was also a treasure unique to the blue race. It was an excellent protective armor. Unless the opponent was a whole realm higher than the person wearing the armor, it would be very difficult to break through the defense of the armor. This was definitely a huge bet between Lan Yu and Hong Mang. Everyone was looking forward to seeing when Qin Chuan would arrive. When the afternoon of the 2nd day arrived, Red Mantis's expression couldn't help but turn gloomy. He didn't have much time left. If Qin Chuan still didn't show up in 8 hours, he would have lost half the battle. Unless Qin Chuan didn't show up on the 5th day, the red eagle he had raised for 100 years would lose to Lan Yu. "Ayo, Hong Mang, you don't look too good." Lan Yu walked over from the side and smiled at Hong Mang. His gloomy expression seemed to indicate that victory was already within his grasp. Seeing Lan Yu smile and the sympathetic gazes of the surrounding people, Hong Mang was about to explode in anger. However, in order to maintain his composure, and for the sake of the red race's reputation, he could only grit his teeth and pretend to be relaxed. It's just a red eagle. I hope you really are as relaxed as you make yourself out to be." Lan Yu laughed. He was extremely pleased with himself and couldn't help but want to bring the red eagle back to show off. As for whether Chuan would still not show up on the 5th day, that wasn't within Lan Yu's consideration. He firmly believed that Chuan wouldn't show up on the 5th day. However, reality was just that dramatic. After the 3rd and 4th day that made him feel dejected, a smile appeared on Hong Meng's face again on the night of the 5th day. As for Lan Yu, his expression was extremely ugly. He really didn't think that Chuan would be so arrogant. It was already the 5th day, and he still hadn't shown up. According to the usual rules, after the 5th day, all the big shots would show up. Chuan still hasn't shown up. Does he think he's a big shot too? Lan Yu gnashed his teeth. Not only was it very likely that he would end up in a tie with Hong Meng, but the red eagle that was within his reach had flown away. More importantly, it was because Chuan's attitude was truly displeasing. It wasn't just Lan Yu who was displeased. The other overlords were also displeased. Everyone was waiting to see Chuan, a young talent, but Chuan still hadn't shown up. This attitude of his was a bit too high. Chapter 1198. Since the start of the Overlord Gathering, Hong Meng and Lan Yu were not the only ones paying attention to when Chuan would arrive. The other overlords, including Sam from the One God sect, were also paying attention to when Chuan would arrive. 5 days had passed. Except for some major powers, all the overlords below the late stage of the combination realm had arrived. There were more than 50 of them, but Chuan was not among them. This Chuan is a little outrageous. The person who spoke was a universe overlord from the Red Race named Hong Jian. In his opinion, although Chuan was powerful, he was still a newcomer among the overlords. He should have arrived 2 days ago. Because of this, Hong Meng thought that Chuan would arrive on the 2nd day at the latest. However, 5 days had passed, and Chuan was still nowhere to be seen. This made Hong Jian a little unhappy. Even the overlords in the early stage and middle stage of the combination realm were here, but Chuan was still nowhere to be seen. Did this mean that Chuan's status in the celestial cluster was higher than theirs? No matter who it was, they would not like such an arrogant person. Therefore, Hong Jian was not the only one who felt that Chuan was outrageous. More or less, the others felt that Chuan was putting on airs a little too much this time. Just as everyone was discussing this matter in low voices, the members of the One God sect who had arrived in the 20th district 5 days ago could not sit still anymore. During these 5 days, although the members of the One God sect were not present, they had been paying attention to the Overlord Gathering. They also thought that Chuan should have arrived long ago. However, the reality was that Chuan was still nowhere to be seen on the 6th day. Jia came to Sam's room. Seeing Sam sitting quietly on a chair and reading a book, he said in a low voice, "Bishop, it's the 6th day, and Chuan is still nowhere to be seen." Sam looked at Jia and said, "Aren't there 4 more days?" Jia hesitated for a moment and said, "But I'm worried that Chuan knows that we're waiting for him and won't dare to come. Maybe he's already run away." Now that all the members of the One God religion had arrived in Area 20, they did not have any extra manpower and stanzos to keep an eye on Chuan. Therefore, they did not know the specific whereabouts of Chuan. On the contrary, Chuan had a close relationship with the Tian people, so it was not difficult for him to obtain information about them. Therefore, it was very likely that Chuan had quietly left stanzos under the cover of the Tian people. If they continued to wait like this, they might not get any results. Sam could understand Tribulation Realm's worries, but he didn't think Chuan would run away. So, he calmly said to Tribulation Realm, "Don't worry. Let's keep waiting." Seeing that Sam was not in a hurry, Tribulation Realm could only force himself to calm down and wait patiently. Finally, on the 7th day, Chuan arrived. Chuan did not bring Lu Zi with him, because Lu Zi was in closed-door cultivation and would not come out until she reached the form synthesis stage. Therefore, only Chuan came this time. Compared to the others who were dressed up, Chuan's outfit was much simpler. He wore ordinary white casual clothes and a baseball cap, which made Qinchuan look like a tourist on vacation instead of a grand overlord party. When Qinchuan walked into the hall, everyone who was chatting stopped talking at the same time and turned their eyes to Qinchuan, who was standing at the entrance of the hall. After confirming Qinchuan's identity, everyone looked at Qinchuan with surprise. This was because Qinchuan was not at the early stage form synthesis stage, as everyone thought, but at the mid-stage form synthesis stage. However, after the surprise, no one showed much enthusiasm for Qinchuan. As if they had discussed it beforehand, everyone withdrew their gazes from Qinchuan and continued their previous conversation. No one wanted to pay attention to Qinchuan at all. Qinchuan did not feel embarrassed at being ignored. He smiled and said loudly, "Everyone, I am Qinchuan." Qinchuan's voice was so loud that it drowned out everyone's voices. Even if someone was talking through voice transmission, they subconsciously stopped and looked at Qinchuan again. This time, everyone looked at Qinchuan with a much sharper gaze and a hint of gloominess. "Qinchuan, you are too presumptuous." The person who spoke was the mid-stage form synthesis stage overlord of the Naga clan, Hailuo. Although Qinchuan was also a mid-stage form synthesis stage overlord, as a senior, he felt that he had the right to teach Qinchuan a lesson. Upon hearing Hailuo's words, Qinchuan chuckled and asked Hailuo, "Who are you?" Hailuo harumphed coldly and said, "I am the second in command of the Naga clan, Hailuo." Qinchuan nodded and said to Hailuo, "I recall that the Naga clan does not live in the celestial cluster." "So what?" Hailuo looked at Qinchuan with a strong gaze and said, "Our Naga clan has our own nebula, and we have more than 5 form synthesis stage overlords. We are one of the most powerful forces in the universe." In the universe, in addition to the major star clusters that were ruled by the ancient races, there were many scattered nebulas and even galaxies. The rulers of these places were basically the more powerful races in the universe. There would at least be 1 or 2 overlords in the form synthesis stage in the race. For a race like the Naga race that had 5 overlords in the form synthesis stage, they could indeed be considered one of the most powerful forces in the universe. Qinchuan smiled at Hailuo and said indifferently, "I didn't come here today to oppose you. If you don't know what's good for you, then don't blame me for cutting you down." Originally, everyone thought that Qinchuan would use the power of the Tian people to oppress Hailuo or tolerate him for the time being. However, no one thought that Qinchuan's attitude would be even stronger than Hailuo's. He actually said that Hailuo did not know what was good for him. These words completely offended Hailuo. "Brat, you gone too far." Hailuo stood up slowly and looked at Qinchuan gloomily. He said, "If you bow down and admit your mistake now, I can pretend that nothing happened." Upon hearing this, Qinchuan grinned and said, "I've never bowed down to any opponent, unlike you Naga clan, who are willing to be ordered around by the one god sect like dogs." Originally, everyone was still wondering why Qinchuan was so strong. Now that they heard Qinchuan's words, they looked at Hailuo subtly. It seemed that the Naga clan had turned to the one god sect without anyone knowing. They were charging forward for the one god sect. After being exposed by Qinchuan, Hailuo's expression changed slightly. Then he stretched out a hand toward Qinchuan and said in a deep voice, "Brat, this is not the place for you to talk nonsense. Kneel down." Chapter 1199. Following Hailuo's angry roar, a wave appeared out of thin air in the hall and rushed toward Qinchuan. The wave didn't look very big, only 100 meters tall and 1,000 meters wide. However, the oppressive feeling it gave off was as if they were facing a monstrous wave that could smash a planet to pieces. The power gathered in the wave was so strong that Dongshu stage cultivators would die upon contact. Even an early unification stage cultivator would have to be careful when facing it. Everyone was slightly shocked when they saw this scene. They wanted to see how Qinchuan would deal with this huge wave. However, what they didn't expect was that Qinchuan didn't dodge. He stood in place and didn't take any measures to counterattack. It was as if he had given up on resisting and was allowing the wave to drown him. Crash! Everyone could clearly see that Qinchuan's body had been submerged by the wave. He was bobbing up and down in the waves, waving his hands and struggling. It seemed that he was under great pressure. Hai Luo saw this scene and laughed proudly. I thought you were very strong. I didn't expect that you couldn't even withstand a mere wave. How laughable. When everyone heard Hai Luo's words, they also felt that Qinchuan's performance was too unsightly. He didn't seem as strong as the rumors said. Could it be that the rumors were all false? Just as everyone was thinking about this, Qinchuan, who was struggling in the waves, suddenly calmed down. Then, he grinned at everyone. I was just teasing you. Qinchuan's words rang in everyone's ears. Soon after, the wave exploded and turned into a curtain of rain that fell from the sky. Qinchuan also took advantage of this to break free and stand on the ground again. Crash! The heavy rain poured down. Everyone looked at Qinchuan with a subtle expression. Who would have thought that Qinchuan would use such a method to tease everyone? Compared to everyone else, Hai Luo's expression was much uglier. Just a moment ago, he was laughing proudly and felt that Qinchuan was only SOSO. However, in the next moment, Qinchuan ruthlessly slapped him in the face. This made him feel a burning pain on his face. Qinchuan, Hai Luo roared. Just as he was about to attack Qinchuan again, a bolt of lightning suddenly pierced through the heavy curtain of rain and struck Hai Luo. Under the violent attack of the lightning, Hai Luo was immediately turned into a charred black man. He opened his mouth and let out an extremely mournful scream. Noisy, Qinchuan frowned slightly. With a wave of his hand, a bolt of lightning appeared above Hai Luo's head out of nowhere and struck Hai Luo. Hai Luo fainted on the spot, and his screams came to an abrupt end. Everyone looked at the severely injured and unconscious Hai Luo, and then looked at the calm Qinchuan. Their dissatisfaction and disgust towards Qinchuan had disappeared and were replaced by vigilance and fear. Hai Luo was a universe overlord who had been famous for a long time. Everyone knew Hai Luo well. Even an overlord at the late stage of the combination realm might not be able to defeat Hai Luo as easily as Qinchuan did. There were a few people who wanted to find trouble with Qinchuan, but now they dismissed the idea. They did not want to follow in Hai Luo's footsteps. Is there no more? Qinchuan looked at everyone playfully and said with a smile, Did the One God sect only bribe Hai Luo? Who else is a fighter for the One God sect? You can step forward now. You can come at me together. When everyone heard Qinchuan's words, they all looked at the people around them. They wanted to see who else had been bribed by the One God sect and was ready to find trouble with Qinchuan. However, it seemed that Qinchuan's previous performance was too strong and domineering. At this moment, no one stepped forward and was willing to continue working for the One God sect. Seeing this, Qinchuan grinned and said to everyone, Since there's no more, I'll find a place to rest. While speaking, Qinchuan walked towards the sofa, seemingly intending to sit down. At this moment, another group of people walked into the hall, attracting everyone's attention. This new group of people was from the One God sect, led by red-cloaked Archbishop Sam. A group of 10 people from the One God sect slowly walked into the hall. Except for Sam, who was an overlord at the pinnacle of the combination realm, the other 9 people were all overlords at the late stage of the combination realm. With such a force, the One God sect could wipe out everyone present. Of course, Qinchuan was an exception. While everyone was paying attention to the One God sect, Qinchuan acted as if nothing had happened. He walked to the sofa and sat down. Then, he closed his eyes and began to rest. When everyone saw Qinchuan's behavior, they did not know what to say. It seemed that he was looking down on the One God sect. Qinchuan ignored the people from the One God sect, but the One God sect would not ignore Qinchuan. Jia received Sam's signal and slowly walked towards Qinchuan. Everyone could not help but look forward to seeing this scene. They wanted to see how the One God sect would treat Qinchuan. Qinchuan. Jia looked at Qinchuan expressionlessly. His voice was low and cold. However, Qinchuan did not seem to hear him. His eyes were still closed, and his expression was calm and relaxed. Seeing Qinchuan's behavior, Jie was furious and wanted to attack Qinchuan. However, when he thought of Sam's previous instructions, he had to suppress the anger in his heart and said in a deep voice, "Qinchuan, I'm calling you. Can't you hear me?" This time, Qinchuan finally responded, "I heard you, but you're not qualified to talk to me. Get someone else who is qualified to talk to me. The one in red is just right." When Jie heard Qinchuan's words, he almost went crazy. He was an overlord at the late stage of the combination realm and the high priest of the one god sect. No matter where he went, he would be treated as a distinguished guest. This was the first time he had been looked down upon like this. Jie, come back. Just as the tribulation realm was about to erupt, Sam suddenly spoke and called it back. Jie suppressed the anger in his heart and returned to Sam's side. He gnashed his teeth and said, "Archbishop, this guy is too arrogant." Sam did not speak. He stretched out his hand and patted Jie's shoulder gently. Then he walked toward Qinchuan. Seeing this, everyone looked at Sam strangely. Who would have thought that the red-cloaked archbishop of the one god sect, who is second only to the Pope, would obediently negotiate with Qinchuan? If this matter were to spread, many people's jaws would drop. Sam walked slowly to Qinchuan's side. He stopped and said indifferently, "I'm Sam, the red-cloaked archbishop of the one god sect." Hearing Sam's words, Qinchuan opened his eyes and looked at him with a playful expression. He said, "You're really obedient." Chapter 1200. No one had expected that Qinchuan would still be so arrogant in front of Sam. He did not take Sam, the red-cloaked archbishop of the one god sect, seriously at all. However, what was even more unexpected was that Sam was extremely calm in the face of Qinchuan's arrogant and despotic attitude. He didn't show any signs of anger at all. Wasn't his ability to maintain his composure a little too powerful? Sam looked at Qinchuan calmly and said indifferently, "You've made great progress. It's amazing." Qinchuan looked at Sam in surprise. He had not expected Sam to be so calm and even be in the mood to praise his talent. This made Qinchuan feel that he was not facing a strong enemy, but a friend. After recovering from his surprise, Qinchuan smiled and asked Sam, "You seem to be very concerned about my progress?" Sam looked at Qinchuan with a subtle gaze and said, "There is no enmity that cannot be resolved. Although many people of the one god sect have died, because of you, as long as you sincerely repent, we can all let go of the past and look forward to the future." This time, Qinchuan was really stunned. He had thought of countless possibilities, but he had not expected Sam to be so friendly. He had even taken the initiative to propose to let go of the past and look forward to the future. "Are you really the red-cloaked archbishop of the one god sect?" Qinchuan looked at Sam suspiciously. "Your attitude makes me doubt your identity." Not only was Qinchuan suspicious of Sam's identity, but the onlookers nearby were also stunned by Sam's attitude toward Qinchuan. When did the red-cloaked archbishop of the one god sect become so amiable? In the face of Qinchuan's doubts, Sam pursed his lips and said, "There are some things that you will understand in the future." Upon hearing this, Qinchuan looked deeply at Sam and asked, "So, how do you plan to resolve the enmity between us?" After hearing Qinchuan's words, Sam fell silent for a moment before replying. "As long as you are willing to join the one god sect and become a new great divine son of the one god sect, all the enmity in the past will be forgotten." Qinchuan was once again stunned by Sam's words. Was there such a thing? For a moment, the onlookers looked at Sam strangely. Sam's behavior was not like the usual behavior of the one god sect. It was too strange. Even Jie and the other high priests of the one god religion had looks of disbelief on their faces. What Sam was doing now was completely different from their plan, let alone the others who could not understand Sam. What was going on? Stop joking. Although Sam appeared very sincere, Qinchuan did not believe that the one god sect would be willing to resolve the enmity in this way. Moreover, he had never thought of joining the one god sect. Upon hearing Qinchuan's words, Sam fell silent for a moment before asking, "You don't agree?" Qinchuan nodded and said, "I won't become your great divine son." However, if you are willing to let go of your enmity and stop bothering me, I can coexist peacefully with you." Upon hearing Chinchuan's answer, Sam sighed and said, "I knew you wouldn't agree from the beginning. However, this is the decree of the Pope. I have to obey it unconditionally and try to recruit you. Since you have already rejected it, there is nothing more for us to say." Chinchuan looked at Sam in confusion and asked, "Is it the Pope's idea to recruit me?" The others also looked at Sam in surprise. The Pope actually wanted to recruit Chinchuan? I don't need to explain too much to a dead man. After Chinchuan clearly refused to join the One God sect, Sam's attitude towards Chinchuan took a 180-degree turn. The expression on his face suddenly became cold, and his voice was extremely low and filled with killing intent. Boom! Without any warning, Chinchuan's body seemed to have been hit by a huge hammer. It suddenly crushed the sofa and penetrated the ground with a bang, sinking into the ground. And this was just one or two. Accompanied by a series of low sounds coming from the ground, Chinchuan's body was blasted deeper and deeper into the ground again and again. With every inch he went, the pressure on Chinchuan increased. At this moment, Chinchuan felt as if he was facing the weight of several planets stacked on top of each other. His whole body was about to be crushed. Sizzle. Finally, Chinchuan could no longer passively endure Sam's attacks. He roared and raised his hand to throw a punch. The power of thunder surged out, breaking through the heavy pressure on his body and returning to the ground. Sam stood in place and looked at Chinchuan, who was like the god of thunder, with the power of thunder surging all over his body. His face suddenly darkened. Immediately, a majestic figure descended in the hall, suppressing everyone. "Heretic, die!" As Sam roared, the majestic figure slowly raised his huge palm and pressed down on Chinchuan's head. Faced with the huge palm pressing down on him, Chinchuan subconsciously wanted to dodge. However, no matter where he appeared, he would always appear under the palm again. It was as if he was going in circles on the spot. Kill! Chinchuan no longer dodged. With a low roar, he used his finger as a sword and slashed at the huge palm. The power of the law of thunder and the powerful sword aura soared into the sky, as if it was going to pierce a hole in the sky. Buzz! The huge palm suddenly shone brightly. No matter how sharp Chinchuan's sword aura was, or how violent the power of the law of thunder was, it could not shatter the light. Chinchuan could only watch as the huge palm descended on his head. World of Wood! Chinchuan roared. A verdant glyph formation suddenly appeared above his head. Countless towering trees grew out of the glyph formation, blocking the huge palm and buying Chinchuan time to breathe. Just as Chinchuan was about to pull away, Sam said indifferently, "Die." As Sam's voice fell, the majestic figure grew infinitely taller, turning into an indomitable giant that broke through the skyscraper. Amidst a violent rumble, he shattered the world of 10,000 trees with a single palm strike. Bang! Under the power of this palm, the earth quaked and the mountains shook. Countless cracks spread out in all directions for where the palm landed. The entire 20th district was affected and showed signs of shattering. If there was another attack like this, there would probably be no 20th district in Stansos from now on. Everyone was shocked by the power of this palm strike. Previously, Sam's attitude towards Chinchuan was so gentle and friendly, but now, Sam's attitude was so overbearing and domineering. This was the true style of the red-cloaked archbishop of the One God sect. Chapter 1201. At this moment, everyone's attention was drawn to this earth-shattering palm. All the overlords present turned pale in the face of this palm. If this palm had been aimed at them, they would have been smashed to smithereens by now. So Chinchuan was already dead. While everyone was shocked and curious about whether Chinchuan was still alive, Sam frowned slightly and looked into the distant sky. There, a figure was looking at him from afar. "Sam, let's go outside and fight." Chinchuan took a deep look at Sam, then turned and flew into space. At this moment, he no longer cared about the rules. The Tian people's guards wouldn't stop him at this moment. Sam glanced at Qin Chuan's departing figure, and the majestic figure behind him slowly dissipated. He tapped his foot lightly and soared into the sky, chasing after Qin Chuan. After Sam left, the crowd couldn't sit still any longer. They all flew towards the universe. They didn't want to miss a single detail of such an exciting and intense battle. At the port, Thelon, who had just arrived, couldn't help but sigh when he saw this scene. We're a step too late. Qin Chuan and Sam have already started fighting. Upon hearing Thelon's words, Sharmila asked worriedly, "Will Qin Chuan be in danger?" Thelon hesitated for a moment before replying, "I can't be sure. After all, Sam is a red-cloaked archbishop. His strength isn't something that ordinary peak combination realm overlords can compare to. Qin Chuan's strength couldn't be measured by common sense. Similarly, Sam's strength couldn't be measured by common sense either. If the two of them clashed, an unprecedented battle would definitely erupt. Let's go and take a look." Sharmila couldn't wait any longer and flew into space first. Qin Chuan's expression turned ugly. Originally, Qin Chuan thought that he would be able to defeat Qin Chuan easily. However, Sammer's performance was a huge blow to Qin Chuan's confidence. If he did not have the ability to travel through space, he would have been crippled. There were too many people watching this battle. Qin Chuan had a lot of trump cards that he didn't want to reveal, but if he didn't use them, it would be too difficult for him to beat Sam. Whoosh! While Qin Chuan was deep in thought, a loud noise came from behind him. Sam had caught up and launched an attack. Qin Chuan's attack was very simple. There was nothing fancy about it. He simply used his strength to attack Qin Chuan. However, it was this pure strength that made it difficult for Qin Chuan to resist. It's the same fusion of power, but Sam's fusion of power is obviously higher than mine. At this moment, Qin Chuan had to admit that Sam was really strong. Normally, when a body integration stage overlord cultivator fused their powers together, they would crush them and mix them together. However, Sam's body integration stage fused his powers together by putting them into a machine and crushing them before fusing them together. The degree of fusion was much higher, and it was much more detailed. Although Qin Chuan's fusion of power wasn't bad, it was still inferior to Sam's. As a result, Qin Chuan could only barely resist Sam's attacks. Bang, bang, bang. Sam kept attacking while Qin Chuan kept defending. The two of them, one attacking and one defending, gradually left Area 20 and entered the universe. When the people behind them saw this scene, they were all very emotional. Qin Chuan could easily defeat Hai Luo, which proved that Qin Chuan was at least a late-stage combination realm overlord, or even a peak combination realm overlord. However, Qin Chuan didn't even have a chance to fight back against Sam. He was crushed by Sam in almost every aspect. At this moment, everyone had to admit that the red-cloaked archbishop of the One God sect was really not to be trifled with. "How long do you think Qin Chuan can last against Sam?" Someone suddenly asked. He didn't think Qin Chuan would win. It won't be difficult to determine the winner, but it won't be easy for Sam to kill Qin Chuan. Although everyone agreed that Qin Chuan wasn't a match for Sam, it would still be difficult for Sam to kill Qin Chuan based on their performance. While everyone was talking, Qin Chuan and Sam's battle entered a more intense stage. Sam's goal was to kill Qin Chuan, not defeat Qin Chuan. Therefore, when he saw that he couldn't break through Qin Chuan's defense after a long period of attacks, he summoned his majestic figure again. This time, there were no geographical restrictions. Sam went all out. The one true God Atheist Dharma idol descend. As Sam's deep voice fell, the one true God Atheist's Dharma idol slowly appeared behind Sam. The Dharma idol was wholly white and wore a white robe that exposed half of its chest and right shoulder. However, it didn't give off a casual feeling. Instead, it gave off a sacred and inviolable feeling. The Dharma idol's face was blurry. No one could see its face clearly. The moment the one true God Atheist's Dharma idol appeared, Qin Chuan felt immense pressure. He knew very well that if he continued to hide his strength, he would definitely die. Therefore, Qin Chuan decided to go all out. Flipping Sky Seal. Qin Chuan shouted. He took out the Flipping Sky Seal and formed a seal with both hands. With the help of the Flipping Sky Seal, He used the complete version of the immortal technique, flipping sky seal. When a bronze seal the size of a hill appeared in the universe, Qin Chuan directed it toward the one true God, Atheist's Dharma idol. Under the attack of the flipping sky seal, the one true God, Atheist's Dharma idol, didn't move an inch. However, Sam was furious. "How dare you blaspheme the gods? Die!" Sam roared. The one true God, Atheist's Dharma idol, slowly raised his hand and slapped the flipping sky seal. The powerful force caused cracks to appear on the flipping sky seal. It looked like it would collapse at any time. Qin Chuan saw this and did not hesitate. He took out the 10,000 demon seal again and activated its power to the extreme. 10,000 demons. Roar. Waves of demonic beasts roared. Thousands of demonic beasts rushed out of the 10,000 demon seal and charged toward the one true God, Atheist's Dharma idol. They attacked ferociously and were not afraid of sacrificing themselves. With the power of the flipping sky seal and the 10,000 demon seal, Qin Chuan finally managed to restrain the one true God, Atheist's Dharma idol. At the same time, Qin Chuan made up his mind to find a way to completely repair the flipping sky seal. The flipping sky seal, which could not exert its full power, was still too weak in a battle of this level. Sam was shocked. He had not expected Qin Chuan to have a way to restrain the one true God, Atheist's Dharma idol. However, Sam had more tricks up his sleeve. He took out a golden scepter and pointed it at Qin Chuan. In a low voice, he said, "Disaster descends." Chapter 1202. Disaster is coming. Qin Chuan had a bad premonition when he heard Sam's words. The next moment, he felt discomfort in his body. He felt dizzy, and yellow snot flowed out of his nose. Achoo! Qin Chuan sneezed, and then his entire body trembled. He actually started to tremble. This was enough to prove that Qin Chuan had caught a cold, and at the same time, a slight fever. Qin Chuan was shocked. Even a cultivator in the qi refining stage would not suffer from this illness, but he, an overlord of the universe, was suffering from it. Achoo! Qin Chuan could not help but sneeze again. This time a large ball of snot was sneezed out, but soon new snot flowed out. Whoosh! Sam's figure suddenly appeared in front of Qin Chuan. He waved the scepter in his hand and hit Qin Chuan hard, sending Qin Chuan flying. Cough, cough, cough. Qin Chuan retreated, coughing uncontrollably. Every time he coughed, it was as if he was going to cough out his lungs. This illness had weakened his body rapidly, and he could only use less than 70% of his strength. If he had not experienced it himself, Qin Chuan would never have believed that such a small illness could have such a huge impact on him. Just as Qin Chuan was thinking about this, Sam attacked again. A powerful force hit Qin Chuan's chest. Qin Chuan instinctively wanted to block, but his illness had slowed down his reaction, and he could not block Sam's attack. Bang! Qin Chuan was sent flying again. This time, his chest was almost pierced, and his sternum was caved in. Damn it! I can't let this continue. Achoo! Qin Chuan sneezed, and the pain in his chest multiplied. The veins on Qin Chuan's temples bulged, and his expression became extremely ferocious. Rainbow light. Qin Chuan growled. He raised his hand and wanted to inscribe a talisman array. However, after a shudder, the talisman characters he drew were wrong. In the distance, Sam sneered when he saw this scene, and he said, "Give up. You're plagued by calamity, and nothing will go smoothly for you." As he spoke, Sam waved the scepter in his hand again, and a wave of energy surged out, pressing toward Qin Chuan. Qin Chuan gritted his teeth and dodged the attack with thunder elemental evasion. He stopped inscribing runes and instead used space traversal to approach Qin Chuan. He held Lei Fa in his hand and wanted a counterattack. But to his surprise, Qin Chuan missed. To be more precise, it should be Qin Chuan's space traversing technique that had gone awry. Bang! Sam punched Qin Chuan's abdomen and sent him flying. He said coldly, "I've said it before. You're plagued by calamities. Nothing will go smoothly for you. Give up struggling." Qin Chuan clenched his teeth, but unexpectedly, one of his teeth was crushed. With a cracking sound, Qin Chuan immediately opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood that was wrapped around his broken teeth. Qin Chuan sucked in a breath of cold air. He was furious. This calamity was even more terrifying than when he faced Province. Game over. Sam looked at Qin Chuan with a deep gaze. He was ready to end this boring battle. He raised the scepter in his hand and shouted, "Divine punishment from the heavens." As soon as Sam finished speaking, Qin Chuan immediately felt a strong sense of danger. He looked up and saw a huge golden scepter suddenly appear above Qin Chuan's head. It was like a sharp sword, piercing towards Qin Chuan. Roar! At the critical moment, Qin Chuan couldn't endure it any longer. His figure abruptly turned, and he suddenly transformed into an enormous golden dragon. The divine dragon swung its tail, and it knocked the incoming scepter flying. The dragon's roar was earth-shattering and intimidating. Dragon. A true dragon. Everyone looked at Qin Chuan, who had suddenly transformed into a dragon, and was deeply shocked. Even Thelon and Sharmila, who knew Qin Chuan well, were shocked. Wasn't Qin Chuan a human? How could he transform into a true dragon? Dragon. Is Qin Chuan a dragon? Sharmila exclaimed. The golden dragon in front of her was very real. This was definitely not an illusion. He is indeed a dragon. But how could he be a dragon? Seeing Qin Chuan transform into the legendary golden dragon, Thelon did not know how to describe his current feelings. The impact on his mind was too great. As for the others, they could not help but doubt their own eyes. They suspected that they had fallen into an illusion. Otherwise, how could they suddenly see a true dragon that had disappeared for countless years? A legendary creature suddenly appeared like this. It was too exciting. Dragon? As Qin Chuan's opponent, Sammer had thought about how Qin Chuan would retaliate. However, he never expected Qin Chuan to transform into a dragon, and a true dragon at that. Roar. Qin Chuan did not answer Sammer's question. At this time, he, who had transformed into a true dragon, used the power of the true dragon bloodline to break through the entanglement of Calamity's descent. He immediately spat a ball of dragon's breath at Sammer. This dragon's breath was no longer blue. Instead, it was pure gold. It contained a powerful, mutated power of golden lightning. It was like a lightning tribulation, and its power was shocking. Sammer did not dare to let his guard down in the face of Qin Chuan's counterattack. He used the scepter in his hand to attack the dragon's breath from afar. However, his attacks were useless in the face of this dragon's breath. They were all defeated. Sammer had no choice but to channel his power into the one true God, Atheus's Dharma power, to resist the dragon's breath. Boom! The dragon's breath came into contact with the one true God, Atheus's Dharma power, and exploded. Countless golden lightning bolts wreaked havoc, showing signs of destroying one of the one true God, Atheus's Dharma power's palms. With the cyclic sky seal and the 10,000 goblin seal in front of him and the dragon's breath attack from behind, the one true God, Atheus's Dharma power, was no longer strong. Instead, it was at a disadvantage. This made Sammer's expression turn gloomy. He had not thought that dealing with one Qin Chuan would be so troublesome. Sammer glanced at the golden scepter in his hand. A hint of reluctance flashed across his eyes. However, it was quickly replaced by determination. He raised the golden scepter in his hand again and said in a low voice, "Divine power, break all spells." As soon as Sammer's voice fell, a golden light suddenly rushed out of the golden scepter. This golden light was filled with the brilliance and greatness of divinity. It easily defeated the combined power of the cyclic sky seal and the 10,000 goblin seal. The cyclic sky seal and the 10,000 goblin seal spirituality were damaged, and they could no longer participate in the battle. However, at the same time, the golden scepter in Sammer's hand became ordinary. It was no longer like before, when there was divinity flowing around it. Sammer sacrificed the golden scepter that had been with him for many years. It was a symbol of his status as a red cardinal that had been given to him by the Pope. He had once again turned the tables. Chapter 1203. Qin Chuan withdrew the 10,000 demons seal and the flipping sky seal. He frowned and looked at the two seals that had been damaged. He then looked at Sam and the Dharma form of the one true God, Atheist, standing behind him. He had to admit that he had seriously underestimated Sam's combat power. No wonder you're one of the only 12 cardinals in the One God sect. You're really something. Qin Chuan looked deeply at Sam. Then he opened his dragon mouth and spat out a ball of golden light at Sam. Heavenly light. At this moment, Qin Chuan used the heavenly light that he had cast with the help of the true dragon bloodline. It was much more powerful than before. It was so powerful that one could not look directly at it. In the face of Qin Chuan's powerful attack, Sam's face darkened. He said coldly, "Slash." Following Sam's shout, the Dharma form of the one true God, Atheist, slowly raised its hand. It seemed to move very slowly, but reached first and blocked the heavenly light with its palm. Then, the heavenly light suddenly exploded, turning into countless rays of truth that scattered in all directions like fireworks. Then, it suddenly changed direction and shot at Sam. Seeing this scene, Sam's expression turned cold. He put his palms together and said in a low voice, "Ineffective. Ineffective. Ineffective. Ineffective." The rays of heavenly light that were shooting at Sam suddenly dissipated when they were about to reach him. At the same time, Sam's face suddenly turned pale, and his breathing became chaotic. Obviously, he had paid a price to block the heavenly light. Qin Chuan saw this and frowned deeply. Is it the absolute command again? Qin Chuan had experienced the power of the absolute command before. However, at that time, he was facing Province. Compared to Sam, Province was still too inexperienced and could not fully display the power of the absolute command. This time, I won't give you another chance. Qin Chuan opened his mouth again and spat out a silver sword light. This time, his target was not Sam, but the Dharma form of the one true God, Atheist. He wanted to shatter the Dharma form before killing Sam. The might of the heavenly sword was unstoppable. Sam looked coldly at the incoming sky sword and said in a low voice, "Dharma power, return to normal." Words were law. The only true God, Atheist's Dharma idol, which had already consumed a large amount of energy, once again became strong after hearing Sam's words. He returned to his peak state and put his palms together, clamping the heavenly sword between them. Whoosh! The heavenly sword didn't advance any further. Instead, it abruptly erupted with boundless sword chi that shot toward the manifestation of the one true God, Atheist. Every single sword chi was imbued with the God sword intent that had already reached grand completion. Wonk. Above the Dharma idol of the only true God, Ares, a pale white light suddenly shot out, blocking the sword chi that was shooting towards him. Seeing this, Sam relaxed a little. As long as the Dharma idol of the only true God, Atheist, was not destroyed, he would be invincible. Just as Sam was thinking about this, a pitch-black cave suddenly appeared in front of him. The next moment, a huge golden dragon claw brazenly slashed out and accurately grabbed Sam's body. When his body was suddenly grabbed by the dragon claw, Sam's expression changed drastically. Just as he was about to speak, the dragon claw's force on his body suddenly increased. He couldn't help but cry out in pain. The words that were on the tip of his tongue couldn't leave his mouth. At this time, Sam still didn't realize that this was his last chance to use the words of law. The dragon claw dragged Sam into an alternate space. However, unexpectedly, Qin Chuan didn't drag Sam out from the other side. He actually threw Sam into the alternate space and only retracted his dragon claw. When the spatial door closed, the connection between the manifestation of the one true God, Atheist, and Sam was cut off. Kill! Qin Chuan let out a low growl, opened his mouth, and spat out several balls of dragon breath at the avatar of the only true God, Ares. Then his huge dragon body rushed forward with all his might, pouncing straight at the avatar of the only true God, Ares. Raising his dragon claws, he viciously clawed at the avatar's face. At this moment, Although the manifestation didn't have a face, everyone could feel its anger. The anger of the one true God, atheists. Asterisk bang. Asterisk without the support of Sam's power. The manifestation of the one true God, atheists, became a rootless duckweed. Under Chinchuan's fierce attacks, it turned into nothingness. At the same time that the manifestation of the one true God, atheists, was destroyed, a nearby space suddenly shattered. Sam rushed out in a sorry state, screaming hysterically, "No! Asterisk poo! Asterisk, the heavenly sword, now free of its restraints, changed its direction and locked onto Sam. In an instant, it pierced through Sam's chest. Sword chi, reinforced by sword intent, instantly exploded in Sam's body, killing without restraint. Cough, cough. Cough, cough. Sam coughed out large mouthfuls of blood, but he ignored the injuries in his body. His eyes were fixed on Chinchuan, and the hatred and killing intent in his eyes overflowed to the heavens. Chinchuan, with a furious roar that resounded through the universe, Red Archbishop Sam perished on the spot. Chinchuan transformed into his human form and stood in the air. Looking at Sam's lifeless body, a deep look flashed across his eyes. The battle was over. Chinchuan had won the battle once again, but this time, Chinchuan felt more tired than ever. He was really, really tired. He had used almost all of his means except for the runic sword to finally defeat Sam in a way that was close to cheating. If he didn't have the inspiration to place Samo in a different space and fight for the opportunity to destroy the Dharma of the only true God, Ares, this battle might not have ended until now, unless he used all his trump cards. But if it really came to this step, his deterrence to the outside world would be greatly reduced, which was not a situation he wanted to see. When Sam rushed out of the alternate space, he had a chance to escape or continue the battle. However, the destruction of the manifestation of the one true God, atheists, had a great impact on Sam's spiritual world, and Chinchuan had seized the opportunity. If not for this, Sam would have put down his pride and ordered the members of the one true God sect to swarm Chinchuan, and Chinchuan would have been in trouble. However, these were all afterthoughts. They were just hypotheticals. Chinchuan, Jie, roared angrily. His eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He had never thought that Chinchuan would actually kill Sam. In the face of Jie's anger, Chinchuan glanced at him indifferently and said indifferently, "If you don't want to die, you'd better shut your mouth." Sam was dead, so it did not matter whether he killed the others. After all, he did not want to completely fall out with the one true God sect. Well, although he had killed many people from the one true God sect, Chinchuan believed that as long as the Pope of the one true God sect was not stupid, he would know what to do. A torn face could still be stitched up, although it would be a little ugly. Chapter 1204. Faced with the threat of death, Jie's throat seemed to be blocked by a mysterious force. He could no longer say a word. He did not want to die. Great fear shrouded Jie, including the other high priests. No one wanted to die, so they chose to remain silent. In the face of Chinchuan's terrifying strength, they were really afraid. At this time, the people who were watching the whole process of the battle from afar had extremely strange expressions on their faces after seeing the performance of Jie and the high priests of the one God religion. Ever since Chinchuan and the one God religion came into contact, the religion had lost a large number of elites to Chinchuan. Now, with the addition of a red-cloaked archbishop, the people of the one God religion were afraid of Chinchuan. After this battle, if the one God religion wanted to find trouble with Chinchuan again, they would have to think twice. If they lost any more high-end combat forces, the one God religion's dominance in the Deus cluster would be shaken. Before seeing the final result of the battle, no one was optimistic about Chinchuan. This was because the red-cloaked archbishop was too famous and Sam's performance was too strong. However, Chinchuan won and killed Sam in a fair and square one-on-one battle. At the same time, everyone finally understood why Qin Chuan could fight above his level and why his combat strength was so strong despite his low realm. These things might be unbelievable if they happened to ordinary people, but if they happened to a real dragon, it was not so hard to understand. A real dragon. However, when they thought of Qin Chuan's true identity and the figure of the golden dragon, they could not help but look at Qin Chuan with awe. They believed that after the news of this battle spread, it would definitely cause a huge sensation. The leader of the demon race, the true dragon race, who had disappeared for countless years, had appeared again. Qin Chuan slowly walked in front of Jie. Looking at the frightened and desperate expression on Jie's face, he smiled faintly and said, "Don't worry, I won't kill you or the rest of you." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Jie suppressed the fear in his heart and asked in a trembling voice, "What do you want to do?" "I want to trouble you to help me pass a message to your Pope, Saint Baudelaire." Qin Chuan looked at Jie with a subtle gaze and said, "Please tell him that whether this matter ends here or not, it's up to him." Jie was slightly stunned when he heard this. From Qin Chuan's words, it was not difficult for him to understand that Qin Chuan did not want to be enemies with the One God sect. However, in this case, why did Qin Chuan repeatedly kill people from the One God sect? Qin Chuan saw the doubts in Jie's heart. He laughed and said, "When I was on the celestial planet, it was the One God sect that changed the rules of the exchange meeting. I killed province within the scope of the rules. I did not do anything wrong, but the One God sect was relentless and wanted to make trouble for me. I had no choice but to fight back, didn't I?" Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Jie's expression suddenly became very interesting. "So, you were forced to kill hundreds of divine envoys, more than 20 combination overlords, and a red-cloaked archbishop of the One God sect? Being forced to do so was really impressive." Jie was madly ridiculing Qin Chuan in his heart, but in fact he did not dare to say a word. He was afraid that Qin Chuan would be forced to do so again. Qin Chuan looked at Jie meaningfully and said indifferently, "In the past, the One God sect bullied me because I was weak and you thought that I was unable to resist. Now that I have shown my strength, if you still want to kill me, you are welcome to find me at any time. But remember, before you find me, you have to be prepared to have your teeth broken by me." Jie's face showed a touch of bitterness when he heard this. He said, "I know. I will pass on your words to His Holiness." Qin Chuan nodded gently and said to Jie, "Then let's go. Leave Stansos before I change my mind." Jie hesitated for a moment and said, "I want to collect the Archbishop's corpse." Qin Chuan smiled and said, "Go ahead." Under Jie's lead, the One God sect left in a hurry after collecting Sam's corpse. At this point, the battle had completely come to an end. "You're really amazing." Thelon looked at Qin Chuan with an extremely complicated expression. Qin Chuan's strength had completely exceeded his expectations. He was really too strong. Qin Chuan smiled and asked Thelon, "After this battle, can your overlord's gathering still go on?" "It can't go on." Thelon smiled bitterly and said, "Everyone's mind is no longer on the gathering. Now, you are the center of their attention. A true dragon. I really didn't expect you to be a true dragon." Qin Chuan pondered for a moment and then said to Thelon, "Strictly speaking, I am a human. However, I do have the blood of a true dragon in my body. I don't deny this." Now, there was no need to continue hiding many things, so Qin Chuan admitted his identity to Thelon very frankly. After hearing Qin Chuan's words, Thelon looked at Qin Chuan subtly and said, "Whether you are a true dragon or a human, your strength is obvious to all. Moreover, the elders sent me a message. They hope to formally form an alliance with you." In the past, Qin Chuan had shown great talent. However, before Qin Chuan realized his talent and strength, the Tian people did not think highly of Qin Chuan. Now that Qin Chuan had reached the form synthesis stage and killed Sam, he proved to everyone that he had the strength to stand at the top of the pyramid. Therefore, the Tian people were willing to formally form an alliance with Qin Chuan and advance and retreat together. Faced with the Tian people's kindness, Qin Chuan smiled and shook his head, No, it is not me who is forming an alliance with you. It is the human race and the demon race who are forming an alliance with you Tian people. Qin Chuan pointed at himself and said, I am a member of the human race. Similarly, I am also a member of the demon race. Since ancient times, the human race and the demon race had been allies. With Qin Chuan's special identity, he could represent the human race and the demon race. Moreover, he did not particularly need the goodwill of the Tian people. The human race and the demon race were the ones who really needed the goodwill of the Tian people. After hearing Qin Chuan's words, Thelon looked deeply at Qin Chuan and said, I know what you mean. Now, let me correct it. The Tian people hope to form an alliance with the human race and the demon race. What do you think? Hearing this, Qin Chuan smiled happily and reached out his hand to Thelon, saying, Then we are comrades in arms from now on. Thelon smiled and shook hands with Qin Chuan, saying, Comrade in arms, I think highly of you. Chapter 1205. Although the battle between Qin Chuan and Sam had already come to an end, its influence had only just begun to ferment. Although there weren't many people present to watch the battle, it didn't prevent those who heard the news from using their rich imagination to recreate the scene. Especially regarding the image of the golden dragon, countless people sighed and regretted not being able to see that wonderful scene. In today's celestial cluster, and even in other distant places, any forces with a little information channel had already heard about this battle. This battle made everyone remember the name Qin Chuan. Soon, the Tian people announced a shocking piece of news to the entire universe. The Tian people would officially form an alliance with the ancient humans and ancient demons. This news shocked the entire universe. At this time, all forces had realized that this battle was not only the battle that made Qin Chuan famous, but also the battle where the ancient humans and ancient demons announced their strong return. Deus Cluster, the only cathedral of the Divine King's continent. Saint Bottle stood in front of the only statue of the one true God, Atheist, with a cold expression. Your Holiness, Sam has fallen. Cardinal Gale, who was standing behind Saint Bottle, looked at Saint Bottle's back with a complicated expression. During this period of time, the one God religion had suffered too many blows. Saint Bottle didn't respond to Gale's words. He was silent, and his eyes never left the statue of the one true God, Atheist. Seeing that Saint Bottle didn't speak, Gale said in a deep voice, Pope, I am willing to avenge Sam and restore the reputation of the one God religion. This time, Saint Bottle finally responded. He slowly turned around, looked at Gale, and asked, How much stronger are you compared to Sam? Gale was slightly taken aback when he heard Saint Bottle's words, and then said in a deep voice, Pope, I am willing to die to protect the reputation of the one God religion. You may die, but he may not. Saint Bottle said faintly, Didn't you hear what he asked the high priest to bring back from Jiejia? Gale became anxious and said loudly, But he is threatening the one God religion, threatening you, and even threatening the one true God. If we tolerate him like this, it will cause great damage to the reputation of the church. Saint Bottle sighed and said, I understand what you are saying, and I also understand that you have good intentions, but some things don't work that way. The one God sect's current status is inseparable from the 12 archbishops. The loss of each archbishop is heavy and extremely painful for the one God sect. Saint Bottle took a deep look at Jiao Lo and said, So, unless it's a last resort, I don't want any of you to fall. 2. Unfortunately, we didn't have the foresight we have now. Saint Bottle said to Gale in a subtle tone, Let go of this hatred for the time being, and don't find trouble with him. Everything can wait until later. Although Gale was very unwilling to accept Saint Bottle's order, he could only swallow his anger and whisper, I understand. After Gale left, Saint Bottle slowly turned around and looked at the statue of the one true God Atheist. He murmured, Actually, I can't take this lying down either, but this is God's will. We have no choice but to obey. While all parties were discussing the matter of Chuan killing Sam, Chuan and Knight Serenity had already arrived at Tron Nebula through the Tion people's teleportation formation and arrived at Tron City. The originally bustling Tron City had now completely turned into a ghost town. When Chuan and Knight Serenity arrived, they did not notice any signs of life in Tron City. Even the scavengers did not visit Tron City. Knight Serenity looked at the dilapidated city under his feet and whispered to Chuan, "Is this Tron City?" Chuan nodded and said, "Yes, but from now on, this place is no longer called Tron City. Its new name is the starting point." While speaking, Chuan raised his hand and tapped lightly. A vast array glyph appeared in the air, and a vast ocean poured down from the sky, completely cleaning the entire Tron City from the inside out. When the ocean current mixed with all kinds of garbage was compressed by Chuan and then thrown into the different space, what appeared in front of Chuan and Knight Serenity was a clean, spotless, brand new city. Its name was the starting point. After the human race and the demon race returned to the universe, it was a new starting point. After doing all this, Chuan said to Knight Serenity, "For the next few days, stay here and wait for me to come back." Knight Serenity nodded and said to Chuan, "I will guard our starting point well." After briefing Knight Serenity, Chuan set off for the Dark Universe in search of the Banished Land. Although various high-tech products could no longer be used in the Dark Universe, Chuan could rely on his connection with Bayou and Mysterious Snake to find the way. Chuan did not take a spaceship, but directly traveled through space. In just half a day, he returned to the same galaxy. At the same time, a subtle connection appeared between him, Bayou, and Mysterious Snake. Chuan went straight into the Dark Universe. After a few days, he finally saw the Hope in space. At this time, Bayou and Mysterious Snake were standing on the Hope's deck, looking at Chuan from afar and welcoming Chuan's arrival. "Thank you for your hard work." Chuan came to the Hope's deck and smiled at Bayou and Mysterious Snake. "Not at all." Bayou smiled at Chuan and said, "Congratulations on reaching the body fusion stage and becoming a universe overlord. However, I feel that you're not just at the early stage of the body fusion stage." Mid-stage body fusion. Mysterious Snake looked at Chuan and sighed. "I didn't expect Master to reach the mid-stage of the body fusion stage in less than a year. That's amazing." Chuan accepted Bayou and Mysterious Snake's congratulations with a smile. Then, he turned his gaze to a dark space not far away. He could clearly feel that there was a small interstellar port under this dark space. It was called the Air Center. "It's been a long time." Chuan sighed. Roughly speaking, it had been 15 or 16 years since he left this place. It felt like it had passed in the blink of an eye. "Let's go back." Bayou looked at Chuan expectantly. "They still don't know of our arrival. I think this would be a great surprise." Chapter 1206. It had been almost half a year since Zerg retreated. Zerg had not returned, and the center of Kunlun's field gradually regained its former peace. As the Alliance's commander-in-chief, Chun Chongqing had been stationed at the center of Kunlun's field. He stood on a tall building and looked at the city that had been rebuilt and restored to its original state. Other than feeling relieved, he was more worried. He had never believed that the insectoids would retreat so easily. He believed that when the insectoids came again, the threat they would face would be greater than any of the previous times. However, he didn't tell anyone about these worries, because he didn't want to affect everyone's good mood. "Zerg, oh Zerg, when will you all die?" If there was one person in the world who wanted Zerg to die the most, it would be Chun Chongqing. He hated Zerg and wanted to trade his life for his. Buzz. Right when Chun Chongqing was sighing with emotion, a pitch-black spatial door suddenly appeared behind him. Chun Chongqing immediately turned around to look behind him when he noticed the abnormality behind him, and his expression changed drastically when he saw the pitch-black spatial door. "Enemy attack." Chun Chongqing subconsciously roared and passed a message to his companions around him. Whoosh! Long Xiao and Blue Pool's figures approached from afar and quickly landed beside Chun Chongqing. They stared at the dark portal in front of them vigilantly and were ready to attack at any time. What is this? Zerg's portal? Blue Pool frowned and asked Chen Chongqing. Chen Chongqing shook his head and said, I'm not sure either. This thing appeared suddenly without any warning, but I'm guessing it has something to do with Zerg. As Chen Chongqing spoke, more and more people had gathered and surrounded the dark portal. The center of Kunlun's field, which had been quiet for half a year, was running like a war machine. Everyone was ready to defend against Zerg's invasion. Just as everyone was focused on the pitch-black spatial portal and was on guard against the Zergs that could appear at any time, a fair and clean hand suddenly reached out from it. Then, a delicate and cute figure jumped out from it. Baiyu looked at the people around her in astonishment. Her expression was slightly awkward. They had been discovered? Seeing Baiyu standing there, Chen Chongqing was stunned. Blue Pool and Long Xiao were also stunned. They couldn't have mistaken that familiar face and figure. Baiyu, is that you? Chen Chongqing couldn't help but feel excited and nervous. He was worried that he had seen wrongly and recognized the wrong person. Baiyu smiled and said to Chen Chongqing and everyone else, Hello everyone, we are back. Hearing Baiyu's familiar voice, Long Xiao's eyes turned red and he shouted excitedly, Baiyu, it really is Baiyu. He said, we? Blue Pool's eyes widened as he asked agitatedly, Is there someone else? Who else? Involuntarily, a name popped up in everyone's mind. Under everyone's excited and expectant gazes, a tall figure slowly walked out of the space portal. He smiled and waved at everyone. Hi, long time no see. Qin Chuan, I'm back. When Baiyu appeared, many people didn't recognize her. However, when Qin Chuan appeared, everyone recognized Qin Chuan. They recognized the man who had once saved the Star Dragon Federation by himself, turned the tide, and completely defeated Zerg's Crimson Army. Qin Chuan, the man who had left the land of exile for 15 years, was back. Boss. Chen Chongqing stepped forward and hugged Qin Chuan tightly. He was very excited and happy to finally see Qin Chuan again, to see Boss. At this moment, everyone who was familiar with Qin Chuan came forward, wanted to give Qin Chuan a warm hug after a long separation. In the past, many ancestors had left the land of exile, but Qin Chuan was the first person who could return from the outside. Don't cry, what do you look like? Qin Chuan looked at the crying Chen Chongqing and couldn't help but tear up. His brother from 15 years ago was still his good brother now. Welcome back. Long Xiao hugged Baiyu, choking with tears and smiling. She was really happy. Qin Chuan grinned at Long Xiao and said, You've become more mature and beautiful. Where's Lu Zi? Long Xiao looked at Qin Chuan and hesitated. Why didn't she come back? Qin Chuan knew that Long Xiao was worried about Lu Zi. He smiled and replied, Don't worry, she's fine. She's in seclusion, so she didn't come back this time. Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Long Xiao let out a long sigh of relief. As long as she was fine, everything was fine. Okay, don't cry. Qin Chuan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He pushed Chen Chongqing away and said, You beat him up so badly. Why are you still crying? Boss, I just miss you. You don't know how hard it's been for me all these years. Chen Chongqing was crying very hard. He was really happy to be able to see Qin Chuan again. All these years, he had carried too many burdens and was constantly under heavy pressure. At this moment, the emotions that had been suppressed in his heart were all released, and he felt much more relaxed. Long Xiao looked at Chen Chongqing, who was crying like a child, and pursed her lips. She said to Qin Chuan, These years, Chongqing has been at the center of the Kunlun heirs, the front line against Zerg's invasion. It's been really hard. Qin Chuan heard this and patted Chen Chongqing's shoulder lightly. It's been hard on you. Chen Chongqing smiled through his tears and said to Qin Chuan, Boss, with your words, it's not hard at all. Okay, hurry up and organize your emotions. Don't make a fool of yourself in front of everyone. Qin Chuan chuckled and looked at the others. Everyone can relax. We don't have to worry about Zerg's invasion for now. Someone is guarding outside for us. This time, Mysterious Snake didn't come in. Qin Chuan planned to call him back when they left the center of the Kunlun heirs, and went to Dragon Valley. Hearing Qinchuan's words, Long Xiao suddenly asked, Qinchuan, half a year ago, did you guys defeat Zerg's invasion? Qinchuan glanced at Baiyu and smiled. At that time, I wasn't back yet. It was Baiyu who killed all the insectoids. Hearing Qinchuan's answer, Long Xiao was stunned. She said, there were so many Zerg. Baiyu alone was enough. Speaking of this, Long Xiao asked again, what are your realms now? Qinchuan and Baiyu's realms were suppressed by the special laws of heaven and earth in the banished land. They were already at the perfect nascent soul realm. However, Long Xiao could feel that Qinchuan and Baiyu's strength was definitely far beyond that. Chapter 12:07. All of them shot their gazes towards Qinchuan and Baiyu when they heard Long Xiao's question. In their hearts, they felt that since Qinchuan and Baiyu had left the lands of exile for over 15 years, their cultivations should have advanced to the legendary soul transformation realm, right? When Qinchuan heard this, he smiled and said to Long Xiao, this question is rather complicated. I won't be able to explain it to you in a short time. Let's leave this place first. I'll patiently answer your questions later. Hearing Qinchuan's words, everyone stopped asking. Under Chun Chongqing's lead, they crowded around Qinchuan to the command center. After everyone was seated, Qinchuan began to ask about the changes that had happened in the banished lands over the years. From Chun Chongqing's description, Qinchuan learned that after he left, everyone had been recuperating. It wasn't until the 6th year that Zerg's invasion came again. In that battle, although they won, the Ancient Ones, Shimen Weiyang and Qin Fenghua died in battle. Qian Wujin and Yi Ting were heavily injured. After that, after another period of recuperation, Chun Chongqing and the others grew up and became the new pillars of the Star Dragon Federation in the Yao Realm. 4 years ago, Qian Wujin's old illness acted up and he died. Yi Ting chose to leave the banished lands and seek a chance of survival in the outside world. After that, Zerg's invasion came again. This battle lasted for about 3 years and only stopped half a year ago. Hearing Chun Chongqing's words, Qinchuan understood that the person captured by Zerg must be Yi Ting. After a brief understanding of these matters, Qinchuan didn't ask too many questions. He decided to return to the Star Dragon Federation personally and see how the Star Dragon Federation had developed. Buzz! In the clear sky, a spatial door suddenly appeared. The Hope slowly flew out and stopped in the sky above the elf city. Qinchuan stood on the deck and looked down at the elven city below him. His emotions were extremely complicated, and he felt as if he was dreaming of the past. It was as if he had once again become that youth who had just entered the elven city and was about to participate in the Black Moon Combat Academy's entrance exam. He was filled with beautiful longing for the future. The Black Moon Combat Academy has been rebuilt on the original site of the Black Moon Mountain Range. Teacher Ning has become the headmaster, while Teacher Su Yuluo is the vice headmaster. Right now, the Black Moon Combat Academy is the university that all youths yearn for. It is the undisputed #1 in Star Dragon. Chun Chongqing was very happy as he introduced the Black Moon Combat Academy to Qinchuan. Qinchuan's influence could not be ignored. Hearing Chun Chongqing's words, Qinchuan smiled and said, "You guys take your time. I'll go see teacher first." As he spoke, Qinchuan's figure disappeared. Seeing this, Chun Chongqing was shocked. What kind of movement technique was this? Wasn't his speed a little too fast? When the Crimson General Kargat had broken through the seal, the Azure Ancient City had been destroyed. Although the city that had been rebuilt was modeled after the Azure Ancient City, it no longer had the ancient charm of the past. Even so, some people preferred the current Azure Ancient City because they could see a kind of tenacity in the new city. As the headmaster of the Black Moon Combat Academy, Ningya's favorite thing to do every day was to lie quietly on the balcony and bask in the sun. When it rained, she would read in the library, organize the books, and do the cleaning. Although these things were trivial, she liked to do them alone and was unwilling to let anyone interfere. On this day, the sun was shining brightly. Ningya hugged a book and lay on the balcony chair with her eyes slightly closed, enjoying the peaceful afternoon. Without a sound, Qingchuan's figure appeared on the balcony and stood beside Ningya. Although more than 10 years had passed, the Ningya in front of him and the Ningya in Qingchuan's memories had not changed at all. She was still as beautiful and charming as before. She always liked to wear well-tailored cheongsams that accentuated her exquisite figure incisively and vividly. Sensing something, Ningya slowly opened her eyes and looked at Qingchuan, who was standing beside her. When she saw the familiar face that had appeared countless times in her dreams, Ningya was stunned. Was this an illusion? Or was this a dream? Ningya stared blankly at Qingchuan until a smile appeared on Qingchuan's face. Only then did she realize that this was not an illusion. "Teacher, I'm back." Hearing this kind and familiar greeting, Ningya pursed her lips and softly said, "Massage my shoulders." "Okay." Qingchuan smiled and walked behind Ningya. He gently put his hands on Ningya's shoulders and began to massage gently. He could feel that Ningya's shoulders were trembling slightly. Ningya cried, but she didn't want Qingchuan to see her crying. She felt that it was ugly. She wanted to maintain her dignity as a teacher. "Teacher, if you want to cry, just cry loudly." Qingchuan smiled and said to Ningya, "Actually, I also want to cry. After so many years, you're still the same. You haven't changed at all. It's really great." Hearing Qingchuan's words, Ningya finally couldn't help sobbing. She whispered, "You brat, you still know to come back." Qingchuan squatted down beside Ningya and smiled at her crying face. He said, "Teacher, I'm sorry. I made you worry. Look at you smiling so happily. You don't look guilty at all." Ningya looked at Qingchuan's shameless appearance and couldn't help but smile through her tears. Today was a good day to be happy. She couldn't cry. It was inauspicious. "Now that you're back, are you still leaving?" Ningya held Qingchuan's hand and looked at Qingchuan kindly, as if she was looking at her own son. Qingchuan nodded and said, "Yes, but not alone. I want to take everyone away from here and go to the outside world." Hearing Qingchuan's words, Ningya was a little curious and asked, "What's the outside world like?" Although Ningya had seen some records about the outside world in the library left behind by Ning Zhongtian, those records were vague. Most of the time, she had to rely on her own imagination. Ningya tried very hard, but she still couldn't imagine what the outside world was like. The outside world is very, very big. There are many planets, galaxies, nebulas, and star clusters. Even if there were 1,000 or 10,000 star dragon federations, they wouldn't be as big as 1/10,000th of the outside world. Moreover, there are many powerful cultivators in the outside world. The Yuanying stage is not even the beginning. Above the Yuanying stage is the Huashan stage, and above the Huashan stage is the Dongshu stage. Those in the Dongshu stage are called powerful cultivators and are already strong. However, above the Dongshu stage is the stronger combination stage, which is called the Overlord of the Universe. "I'm now an Overlord of the Universe." Qingchuan was very proud. He hoped that Ningya would be proud of him too. Chapter 1208. Looking at the proud look on Qingchuan's face, Ningya smiled and said, "It seems that you are very powerful." Qingchuan smiled and nodded. He replied, "If I wasn't powerful enough, I wouldn't have said that I would lead everyone out. With me around, everyone will definitely be able to develop better in the outside world." Ningya nodded gently and said, "I naturally trust your ability. However, not everyone in this world is willing to leave their homeland. If you want everyone to leave with you, it will be very difficult." Hearing Ningya's words, Qingchuan was silent for a moment before he replied, "Teacher, this place is called the Land of Exile. It is not the homeland of the human clan or the demon clan. The outside world is our real homeland. I understand what you are saying, but you have to know that we have lived and multiplied in this place for countless years. For some people, the outside world is empty and unrealistic. Only here is their homeland." Ningya sighed. Of course, she understood Qingchuan. She also understood that Qingchuan had good intentions. However, some things were not as simple as they seemed. Now, She was telling Qin Chuan these things in the hopes of giving Qin Chuan some warning so that Qin Chuan could be mentally prepared. Teacher, I understand what you mean. Qin Chuan smiled. Everyone has their own aspirations. You can't force them. This time, I will leave with those who are willing to go with me. Those who are unwilling to leave can stay here. Qin Chuan had never liked to force others to do things that they did not want to do. If someone was unwilling to go to the outside world and wanted to stay in the land of exile, he would have no objections. Teacher, you are willing to go with me, right? Qin Chuan could ignore others, but he had to care about Ningya. This teacher had always taken care of him, taught him, and protected him when he was still weak. He could not ignore her. Ningya smiled and said to Qin Chuan, as long as you don't think I'm a burden, I'm certainly willing to follow you to see the vast world outside. Qin Chuan's face immediately revealed a touch of joy when he heard this, and he said, then it's settled. While Qin Chuan and Ningya were chatting, the Hope slowly arrived above the Black Moon Combat Academy, attracting the attention of many people. Many batches of students had changed in the Black Moon Combat Academy, and some of the teachers had retired. Therefore, when Bayu's figure appeared above the Black Moon Combat Academy, she did not attract much attention. Instead, it was Chun Chongqing and the others who were recognized. The world has changed. Things remain the same, but people have changed. The students now, other than Boss, probably don't remember you and Lu Zi. Chun Chongqing chuckled and asked Bayu, you won't be sad about this, right? Bayu smiled and shook her head, saying, why would I be sad? Isn't it normal that everyone doesn't know each other? Long Xiao smiled and said, in the past, Bayu was the one who spoke the least. She usually stayed hidden most of the time and would only step forward at critical moments. At that time, there weren't many people paying attention to her, let alone now. However, I've noticed that Bayu seems to be much more cheerful this time. It was not only Long Xiao who felt this, but Chun Chongqing also felt the same. After all, Bayu almost never smiled in the past. Bayu smiled and replied, some things have been put down, some things have been undone, and some wishes have been fulfilled. Naturally, I've become more cheerful. The Crimson General Carded, who had caused the destruction of the Elven race, was dead. The Hope had been recovered, and she had seen the Eternal Forest. After experiencing so many things, she had completely transformed. She was no longer the taciturn Bayu. That's for the best. Chun Chongqing laughed. He was a person who liked to laugh, and the current Bayu was more to his liking. Who? A breeze blew and a petite and cute figure appeared in front of everyone. She looked at Bayu, who was standing between Chun Chongqing and Long Xiao, with tears in her bright eyes. She choked and said, is it you, little Yu? Hearing this familiar name, Bayu smiled and opened her arms, saying, Teacher Su, I'm back. Hearing Bayu's words, Su Yuluo immediately jumped into Bayu's arms and said happily, you're finally back. I missed you so much. Bayu hugged Su Yuluo and said with a smile, Teacher Su, you're like a child. I'm a child. Su Yuluo cried in response. Although she was already at the great circle of the nascent soul stage, she had been a lowly for hundreds of years. She was still a child. Bayu finally calmed Su Yuluo's excited mood and said, I came back this time because I was asked by someone to ask about Teacher Lu's situation. The Teacher Lu that Bayu mentioned was Lu Zi's grandfather, Lu Xiangyang. He was Lu Zi's only relative. This time, Lu Zi couldn't come back, so she asked Bayu to pay attention to Lu Xiangyang's situation. Su Yuluo replied, Teacher Lu has been very good. He's now at the late stage of the nascent soul stage. Hearing Su Yuluo's answer, Bayu was relieved. No matter what Lu Xiangyang's realm was, as long as he was alive, it was fine. When he went to the outside world, with Lu Zi and Qin Chuan, Lu Xiangyang would definitely live a long life. Except for you. Didn't the others come back? Su Yuluo looked around but didn't see Qin Chuan and Lu Zi. Bayu smiled and said, Lu Zi is in seclusion, so she didn't come back. Qin Chuan came back one step ahead of us. He should be with Teacher Ningya now. Then let's go find him. Su Yuluo was very concerned about Qin Chuan, the most outstanding student in the history of the Black Moon Combat Academy. At this time, Qin Xuan and Ning had already left the balcony and gone to the library in the backyard. When the Azure ancient city had been destroyed, the library had also been reduced to ruins. Later, when the Black Moon Combat Academy had been rebuilt, Ning had dug out the library from the ruins of the Azure ancient city. She had taken out a portion of the books that hadn't been destroyed and reorganized them into the new library. This new library had been rebuilt according to the original library, so it didn't look any different. The only difference was that there was an additional tomb in the courtyard besides the flower bed. Ningya stood in front of the tomb and pursed her lips slightly. She said to Qin Xuan, "This is teacher's tomb. He liked to read, so I buried him here." Qin Xuan took out a cup of wine and poured it in front of the tomb. He then knelt down and respectfully kowtowed 3 times to the tombstone. "Grandmaster, I'm back." Looking at Qin Xuan kneeling in front of the tomb, Ningya said faintly, "Teacher, your spirit in heaven must be very pleased to see such an outstanding grand disciple. At least, I'm very pleased." Chapter 1209. When Baiyu and the others came to Ningya's residence and found her, Qin Xuan had already left. He planned to walk around alone, visit some of the places he had been to, and reminisce about the past. Qin Xuan's first stop was the state capital of Qing, the place where he was born and raised. Since he left that year, he had never returned. Now he wanted to go back and take a look and settle some old matters. When Qin Xuan returned to his old residence in the slums, he was very surprised to find that the slums had been rebuilt and turned into a bustling city. However, his house was well preserved, and there was a big sign in front of the door. Qin Xuan's old residence. Seeing this sign, Qin Xuan did not know whether to laugh or cry. He really did not expect that something like this would happen to him. When he saw the old man who was almost 70 years old sitting under the sign and dozing off, Qin Xuan's eyes could not help but soften. Qin Xuan's figure appeared in front of the sign and reached out to gently knock on the table. The old man who was dozing off was awakened. He looked up at Qin Xuan and said, "Visit Qin Xuan's old residence, 20. The old man stopped before he finished speaking. He stared blankly at Qin Xuan and was stunned. Qin Xuan saw this and laughed. He said, "Old man's son, we haven't seen each other for many years. Don't you recognize me? It's really you?" Old man's son was a little surprised, and then he laughed. As he laughed, he got up and hugged Qin Xuan. "You're back." Seeing that old man's son was not restrained because of the difference in status, but instead was as piercing as before, Qin Xuan's heart could not help but soften. He said softly, "Yes, I'm back. I didn't expect you to be a ticket seller instead of a celestial device repair. Haha, I'm old now. That shop has been inherited by my grandson. Now I sell tickets here and help you look after this place." Old man's son laughed and said to Qin Xuan, "Do you want to go in and have a look?" Qin Xuan nodded and then walked inside with old man Sunday. As they walked, old man son was still sighing. "When I saw you just now, I didn't recognize you wrongly. I was just worried that you were not the Qin Xuan I was familiar with. When I saw you smile and greet me, I was sure that you were the Qin Xuan of the past. You were sensible and polite. Otherwise, I wouldn't dare to take the initiative to hug you." Hearing old man son's words, Qin Xuan smiled and said, "No matter what I become, you will always be my old man son, my boss." Although Qin Xuan had not returned to the state capital of Qing for many years, he had always been thinking about Old Man Sunday. Back then, before he met Ningya, if Old Man Sun had not been kind enough to let him work in the shop, he would probably have to pick up garbage to eat. Looking at the familiar environment, Qin Xuan felt as if he had returned to the time when he was 17 years old. At that time, he lived a fulfilling life every day. Whether he went to school or worked, he worked hard to survive. This place carried too many memories for him. Old Man Sun lit a cigarette, smacked his lips, and said to Qin Xuan, "I heard that you left the Star Dragon Federation, but I don't know where you went. You probably don't know much about the state capital of Qing now. Hee, the second middle school has reopened. Do you know who the principal is?" Qin Xuan was curious and asked, "Who is the principal?" Old Man Sun grinned and said, It's that girl from back then. Although Old Man Sun didn't say that person's name, Qin Chuan already knew who that person was. Recalling what had happened in the past, the expression on his face couldn't help but become a little complicated. This girl came back 10 years ago. At that time, she was already a nascent soul cultivator. She should have had a bright future ahead of her. However, she suddenly came back and restarted the second high school. She became the principal of the school. After all these years, the second high school has become the best high school in the state capital of Qing. And she's really amazing. Qin Chuan smiled and suddenly wanted to go back and have a look. With Wang Wenshua's talent, she should have been a cultivator in the perfected nascent soul stage if she focused on cultivation. However, in the past 10 years, she put all her efforts into teaching and educating people, so she was only in the advanced nascent soul stage. However, Wang Wenxue did not have any regrets or dissatisfaction about this. On the contrary, she felt that her current life was the most suitable for her. On this day, Wang Wenxue did not work in the office. She stood on the balcony and looked at the sky in the distance, feeling slightly complicated. Not long ago, Yi Qingning sent her a message and told her that the person who had left for 15 years had returned. Yi Qingning did not say the name, but Wang Wenxue knew who that person was. She did not know if that person still remembered her, nor did she know if that person knew everything that she had done until now. However, she knew in her heart that the gap between her and that person had become extremely huge. Perhaps she did not even have the right to appear in front of that person. Long time no see. Suddenly, Wang Wenxue heard a very familiar voice. She slowly turned her head and looked to the side and smiled. Indeed, it has been a long time. Qin Chuan looked at the school outside the balcony and smiled. I have never looked at the school from this angle before, but I feel that everything should be the same as before. Indeed, there is no difference. Wang Wenxue nodded. Except for the people, everything is the same. Qin Chuan nodded. You must have worked hard all these years. Teaching and educating people is not hard. Wang Wenxue smiled. I feel that I have lived a very happy and fulfilling life. It is very gratifying to see these little guys grow up happily and safely without being oppressed or ostracized. That is very good. Qin Chuan smiled and suddenly asked, Is Black City still there? Wang Wenxue nodded. Yes, it is. It is said that it is because you owed a favor to City Lord Qin that Black City was able to be preserved. Qin Chuan laughed when he heard Wang Wenshue's words. You're right. I did owe them a favor back then. Now, it's time for me to return the favor. Wang Wenxue nodded gently. Go, and thank you for coming to see me. No need to thank me. After all, we are friends. As the sound of his voice faded, Qin Chuan's silhouette had already vanished. Wang Wenxue stared at the empty space beside her, feeling as though she was in a dream. However, she was very clear that everything that had happened earlier was not a dream. I wonder how powerful he has become now. Wang Wenxue smiled. Anyway, he must be more powerful than her. Chapter 12:10. Ever since the incident in the Sky City, the Black Cities all over the world had been affected. Only a few of them had survived, and that was the Black City in the state capital of Qing. The mayor, Qin Hua, was now a cultivator in the exceptional gold core realm. The deputy mayor, Chu Ning, had also stepped into the gold core realm. As the only remaining Black City in the Star Dragon Federation, it was more lively and prosperous than before. Even during the day, there were people coming and going. Many people came because of its reputation, because many people knew that the Black City could survive because of Qin Chuan. And Qin Chuan was the idol of many people, especially the young people. The mayor's mansion. Qin Hua stood in front of the window and looked at the prosperous Black City. He couldn't help but think of what had happened here in the past. At that time, he was still a cultivator in the Foundation establishment realm. He met Qin Chuan here for the first time. At that time, he didn't realize how many miracles that ordinary young man would create in the future and how many wonderful stories he would leave behind. Father, this is the financial report of last month. Chu Ning, who was wearing a black suit, walked over slowly and stood behind Qinghua. She looked out of the window like Qinghua. Looking at the prosperous Black City, she was speechless for a long time. She didn't know when it started, but Chu Ning had the same habit as Chu Hua. They both liked to stand in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and admire the scenery outside. Sometimes the focus was on the people, and sometimes the focus was on the buildings. Sometimes, after looking for a long time, Chu Ning didn't know what she was looking at. She was just used to standing here and looking out of the window. Just as Chu Hua and Chu Ning were quietly looking out of the window, Qinchuan's figure quietly appeared behind them. Looking at Chu Hua and Chu Ning, who were standing side by side, he smiled and said softly, "Long time no see." Hearing the sudden appearance of a third person, Chu Hua and Chu Ning subconsciously turned around. When they saw the familiar face of Qinchuan, Chu Hua and Chu Ning were stunned. "Don't be surprised. I'm here today to repay the favor of that year." Qinchuan looked at Chu Hua. "If it weren't for the 2 talisman arrays you provided me, my initial cultivation path might not have been so smooth." In less than 10 minutes, Qinchuan left the Black City. Chu Ning stood aside and looked at Chu Hua, who had advanced from the Jidan Perfect stage to the Yuanying stage. His eyes were full of shock. Just now, Qinchuan had only lightly tapped Chu Hua's forehead, and Chu Hua had broken through the calmness of the Golden Core realm and directly entered the nascent soul realm. Just as the lightning tribulation condensed, Qinchuan dispersed it with a wave of his hand. In Chu Ning's opinion, this was simply the work of an immortal. After Chu Hua quietly felt the power of the nascent soul stage, he turned his head and looked at Chu Ning. He whispered, "Now, our Chu clan has nothing to do with him anymore." At the beginning, Chu Hua's request to Qinchuan was to let Qinchuan help him to advance from the foundation establishment stage to the Golden Core stage. Now, although Qinchuan's return came a little late, he helped him to advance from the Golden Core stage to the nascent soul stage. It was definitely an advantage for him. Otherwise, with his talent, he might not be able to touch the threshold of the nascent soul stage in this lifetime. Get ready. We'll leave the Black City and hand over the management of the Black City to the Federation. Chu Hua was very smart. There were some things that could be done in the past, but definitely not now. Coming to the Cloud Dragon Mountain Range again, Qinchuan couldn't help but think of Zhou Lin's figure. The first time he came to the Cloud Dragon Mountain Range, it was Zhou Lin who brought him here. At that time, he was just a little guy in the body refining stage, not even an official cultivator. It was Zhou Lin who led him on the road of cultivation. If it wasn't for Zhou Lin, maybe he could also become a cultivator, but he would definitely have to take a lot of detours. After passing through the layers of illusion, Qinchuan slowly walked to a lonely grave. Back then, he personally buried Zhou Lin here. Now that 15 years have passed, everything here was still the same as when he left. There was almost no change. "Senior sister, I'm back to see you." Qinchuan squatted in front of the grave and looked at the tombstone with an extremely complicated gaze. At this moment, Zhou Lin's voice and smile appeared in front of his eyes. "Buzz." Just when Qinchuan was recalling the past, there was a sudden movement in his storage ring. He was a little surprised and took out a golden stream of light from the storage ring. This golden stream of light just left the storage ring and flew out of Qinchuan's control and went straight into the grave. Seeing this scene, Qinchuan couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice, "What's going on? Lin, could it really be senior sister?" All this time, Qinchuan had been curious about whether there was a connection between Lin and Zhou Lin. Although there were many coincidences, he didn't have any conclusive evidence. Now that the golden stream of light suddenly reacted in front of Zhou Lin's grave, Qinchuan realized that perhaps something was about to happen. Under Qinchuan's expectant and nervous gaze, a slightly pale hand reached out from under the grave. Whoosh! The grave was completely pushed away and a pale figure emerged from it. If an ordinary person were to see this scene, they would probably be scared to death. However, Qinchuan's heart was filled with joy. That familiar aura, she's back. Qinchuan, half of Zhou Lin's body was sitting in the soil. She looked at Qinchuan, squatting in front of her, and a smile suddenly appeared on her face. I had a dream. I dreamed of many, many things. It was about some strange experiences, and it was also about you. Zhou looked at Qin Chuan. I want to tell you. Qin Chuan's eyes were filled with tears. He smiled and nodded. All right, let's talk slowly. I'll listen. The story wasn't very long. Zhou only took one night to finish telling it. In the story, Zhou fell asleep. When she woke up, she appeared in a palace. She forgot her past, didn't know who she was, and didn't know why she was here. She lived in confusion and ignorance. Later on, she met a very special person. Later on, she followed that special person out of that world and into a wider world. In this wider world, she learned a lot of knowledge and made some new friends. She also encountered some things, both good and bad. Among these things, the one that she cared about the most was that special person. His name was Qin Chuan. I really have to thank you for being able to wake up again, Qin Chuan. Zhou looked at Qin Chuan. Her gaze was gentle as always. Qin Chuan smiled and said to Zhou, Senior sister, welcome back. Chapter 12:11. It took Qin Chuan 10 days to travel across half of the Star Dragon Federation. Finally, he arrived at Star Dragon City. In Star Dragon City, there were many friends and opponents of his past. But now that more than 10 years had passed, he had let go of the past. This time, he came to Star Dragon City not only to see Fatty Wong Bo, but also to see Qin Ju and Gaoan. The Fatty Wong Bo from back then had now become a famous doctor in the Star Dragon Federation. His medical skills were superb. As long as the person wasn't dead, no matter how serious the injury was, he could save them. In addition, it was rumored that Wong Bo and Qin Chuan were brothers. This made Wong Bo's status even more extraordinary. Later on, there was a saying, it was better to offend Chairman Gao than miracle Dr. Wong. When Qin Chuan heard about this, he did not know whether to laugh or cry. He did not expect Wong Bo to become a miracle doctor after so many years. He was really not simple. Didn't that person say that Wong Bo comes to the East City almost every day? Let's go and take a look. Zhou was very unfamiliar with the changes in Star Dragon City. After more than 10 years, Star Dragon City was no longer the Star Dragon City she was familiar with. Qin Chuan smiled and nodded. That's good too. Let's go and take a look. As soon as Qin Chuan and Zhou arrived at the East City, they saw a long line. There were at least 4,000 to 5,000 people in the line. These people were all here to see Wong Bo. With Wong Bo's diagnosis speed, the limit of a day was about 1,000 people. The others were here to occupy a spot. It was said that the line now would be effective in the future. If someone dared to cut the line, they could forget about getting Wong Bo to treat them in their lifetime. Not only that, they would even be rejected by the entire medical system. Therefore, no one dared to cut the line. Zhou looked at the situation in the line and said to Qin Chuan, if we have to line up, we will have to wait for about 5 days before we can see Wong Bo. Qin Chuan glanced at the patients in the queue who looked weak and were enduring the pain. He smiled and said, leave this to me. As he spoke, Qin Chuan lifted his hand and gently waved it towards the group. Pure energy seeped out of his body and circled around the group like a light smoke. Anyone who was touched by the light smoke would have their illnesses cured in an instant. Their wounds also healed in the blink of an eye. As more and more of this happened, the group immediately became chaotic. Although Qin Chuan's cultivation base had been suppressed to the perfected nascent soul stage, his power was truly that of a body integration stage overlord. The purity of this power was the perfect treatment for ordinary people. Although Qin Chuan didn't know how to treat patients, he could easily wipe out the virus in the patient's body. His methods of saving people were even better than Wong Bo's. What's going on? Have I recovered? Really? My leg is not limp. That's great. My arm has been reattached. More and more cheers rang out from the crowd, so much so that the entire East City was in an uproar. Everyone was cheering Wong Bo's name and praising his achievements. This made Wong Bo, who was sitting in the clinic, extremely confused. He had no idea what was going on. Thank you, Miracle Dr. Wong. Miracle Dr. Wong, your kindness is like a new life. I can't thank you enough. Thank you, Miracle Dr. Wong. You are a good person. Thank you, Miracle Dr. Wong. Wong Bo sat on the chair in a daze. He looked at the excited crowd outside the door and asked curiously, "What's going on? Have these people recovered from their illnesses?" Wei Zixin, who was sitting beside him, shook her head and said, "I'm not sure either." Perhaps, before Wei Zixin could finish her sentence, two figures suddenly appeared in the clinic and stood in front of them. When they saw the familiar faces, both Wang Bo and Wei Zixin were stunned. Qin Chuan smiled and said to Wang Bo, "In order to see my good brother as soon as possible, I treated those people's illnesses. I hope you don't mind that I stole your job." Upon hearing Qin Chuan's words, Wang Bo exclaimed excitedly. He jumped up from the chair and jumped into Qin Chuan's arms. "Brother, you're finally back." Looking at Wang Bo, who was crying tears of joy, Qin Chuan grinned and said, "Brother, I'm back." After the free clinic, Wang Bo and Wei Zixin led Qin Chuan and Zhou Lin home. On the way home, Qin Chuan found out that Wang Bo and Wei Zixin had gotten married more than a decade ago. They had a daughter named Wang Tian. "Congratulations. It's a pity that I couldn't attend your wedding." Qin Chuan smiled and said to Wang Bo, "Let's make up for it tonight. We're not going home until we're drunk." "That's exactly what I was waiting for." Wang Bo laughed. "I know your cultivation is high, but you're not allowed to force the alcohol out of your body. Otherwise, I'll fight you." When they returned home, the 10-year-old Wang Tian actually recognized Qin Chuan at first glance and sweetly called him uncle. Qin Chuan was surprised, but Wang Bo and Wei Zixin were not surprised at all. This was because Wang Bo had photos of Qin Chuan in his family's photo album. There were also photos of Qin Chuan displayed on the table at home. Wang Tian had even grown up listening to stories about Qin Chuan. She was naturally very familiar with Qin Chuan. Just as Qin Chuan and Wang Bo's family were happily drinking, eating, and chatting, a new guest arrived at Wang Bo's home. It was the chairman of the Star Dragon Federation, Gao In. Gao In learned about Qin Chuan's return from Qinchangxing. However, because Qin Chuan was alone, Gao In was not able to contact Qin Chuan at first. It was not until the day that he heard about the miracle that happened in the East City that he guessed that Qin Chuan had returned and came to look for Wang Bo that he came uninvited. Gao In and Qin Chuan could be considered comrades in arms in the past, and the two had a good relationship. Therefore, Qin Chuan was only happy about Gao In's arrival and did not feel displeased at all. However, Gao In was still shocked when he saw Zhou Lin, who had come back from the dead. He did not expect that Qin Chuan had even learned the ability to bring the dead back to life. With regards to this, Qin Chuan smiled and gave a simple explanation before brushing it aside. If Gao In had not taken the initiative to look for him tonight, Qin Chuan would have gone to look for Gao In the next day. After all, Gao In was the chairman of the Star Dragon Federation. If he wanted to migrate all the humans to the outside world, he would need Gao In's help. After Qin Chuan and Gao In had a toast, Qin Chuan directly asked, "Brother Gao, what do you think of the outside world? Have you ever thought of leaving here and looking around?" Chapter 12:12. Hearing Qin Chuan's question, Gao In wasn't surprised, because as early as when Chun Changxing contacted him, he had already revealed Qin Chuan's idea to him, so he was mentally prepared. "Qin Chuan, to be honest, your idea of migrating everyone to the outside world is not realistic. We cultivators certainly yearn for the outside world and want to go out, but for some ordinary people, I'm afraid it's very difficult to make them leave their homes." Every word Gao In said was carefully considered. Qin Chuan's idea was certainly good, but it was too idealistic and not realistic. Qin Chuan smiled and said, "I have naturally considered this point. I will only take those who are willing to leave to the outside world, and those who are not willing to leave can stay. I won't force anyone." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Gao In was relieved. He was really worried that Qin Chuan would force everyone to leave together. In that case, he was afraid that it would cause a lot of trouble. I think most of the cultivators will be willing to leave here and go to the outside world. Gawain smiled and said to Qin Chuan, "We will be basking in your glory again." Qin Chuan smiled and said to Gao, "Brother Gao, I wonder how our relationship with the demon realm has been all these years." Hearing Qin Chuan ask about the demon realm, Gao replied, "Since Zerg's invasion, our relationship with the demon realm has become much more harmonious than before." Speaking until here, Gao paused for a moment, then said, "In the demon realm, the current demon emperor is no longer Yao Feng, but Yao Rao." Yao Rao. Hearing Gao say this very familiar name, the expression on Qin Chuan's face couldn't help but become somewhat subtle. In the matter of those years, although no one was in the wrong, but in the end, he had let down Yao Rao. So all along, Qin Chuan felt that he owed Yao Rao in his heart, but he didn't know how to compensate Yao Rao. Seeing Qin Chuan was silent, Gao coughed and said, "Brother, there is one thing you still don't know. After Yao Rao became the demon emperor, she was destined not to marry in this life. This is the rule of the demon realm, so you don't need to think about some things." Qin Chuan nodded gently and said, "I know about this matter, and this time, not only will we leave here, the demon realm will also leave together. I want to trouble Brother Gao to personally go and tell the demon realm about this matter. No matter what decision they make, I will respect it." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Gao nodded and said, "Leave this matter to me, don't worry. Don't worry." After talking about the demon realm, everyone tacitly ended the topic and started a new one. They talked about everything under the sun until the next morning. When the sky was bright, Qin Chuan had already left alone. He wanted to go to the Qin clan to pay respects to his mother in the ancestral hall. When Qin Chuan arrived at the Qin clan's ancestral hall without alerting anyone, he unexpectedly saw Qin Ju in the ancestral hall. However, Qin Ju wasn't surprised at all by Qin Chuan's arrival. "Changxing told me that you were back. I didn't know if you would come to see me, but I guessed that you would definitely come to pay respects to sister, so I waited here for you. Fortunately, I finally managed to wait for you." Qin Ju looked at Qin Chuan, whose appearance hadn't changed at all, with a gratified expression on his face. After walking the martial world for half of his life, he still returned as a youth. Qin Chuan smiled and said to Qin Ju, "I have no intention of avoiding Little Ant. Because Star Dragon City is the last stop, I plan to see Little Ant again after I come to Star Dragon City. Otherwise, I would have come to see Little Ant as soon as possible." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Qin Ju sneered and said, "If Ningya hadn't called me 10 days ago, I would have believed you." Qin Chuan's face immediately revealed an awkward expression when he heard this. In the past, he knew that Ningya and Qin Ju were always competing with each other and were bad friends. He originally thought that after more than 10 years, Ningya, who had already become the dean, would become more mature. He didn't expect her to still be so childish. Not long after he left, she immediately called Qin Ju to show off. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Looking at the awkward expression on Qin Chuan's face, Qin Ju smiled and said, "All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Come in." Qin Chuan followed behind Qin Ju and walked into the Qin family's ancestral hall. In the hall of the ancestral hall, the ancestral tablets of the Qin family's ancestors were enshrined. On the left side of the offering table, there was a smaller offering table with only 2 memorial tablets on it. Qin Tian, Qin Xing. Looking at the names on the tablets, Qin Ju whispered to Qin Chuan, "I was the one who made the decision to release their tablets separately." Qin Chuan nodded lightly and said to Qin Ju, "Thank you." Qin Ju moved aside and said to Qin Chuan, "Go pay your respects to them." Qin Chuan stepped forward and knelt respectfully in front of the memorial tablets. He kowtowed 3 times to Qin Tian and Qin Xing's memorial tablets and said, "Father, Mother, although I don't have any memories of the 2 of you, I know that the 2 of you are good parents. Fortunately, as a son, I did not disappoint you. Your spirits in heaven should be gratified." Hearing Qin Chuan's words, Qin Ju, who was standing at the side, sighed and said, "I think they will be very gratified." After paying their respects to their parents, Qin Chuan and Qin Zhu left the ancestral hall and went to the courtyard outside. Qin Chuan, I heard that you plan to bring everyone away from here to the outside world. Qin Zhu looked at Qin Chuan curiously. He wanted to know what Qin Chuan was planning. Qin Chuan nodded and said to Qin Zhu, "That's right, I do have this idea. However, I will definitely not force you. It's all voluntary." At this point, Qin Chuan paused for a moment before continuing. "This time, I will treat everyone equally and will not have any prejudice. Therefore, if the Qin family also wants to leave, I will not have any objections." Qin Zhu smiled and said, "I didn't see you to plead for mercy. I'm just curious about what the outside world is like. Will we not be able to get used to going to the outside world without any foundation?" Qin Chuan replied, "I've thought about this question before, but I don't think it's difficult. After all, I've experienced this before. As long as I read more books and understand more things, I'll naturally be familiar with the outside world." Qin Chuan had naturally considered this question raised by Qin Zhu. Before he left Stansos, he had already asked Thelon to help him get some ordinary books and materials to send to Starting Point City. As long as the people who left with him knew how to read and were willing to read, he believed that everyone would be able to quickly familiarize themselves with the outside world. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.